Administration has announced more medications that will be targeted for lower prices under Medicare. NPR's Sydney Lupkin reports negotiating drug prices in Medicare is a new power created by Biden's Inflation Reduction Act.
The federal government and the pharmaceuticals industry are about to go head-to-head once again. In its last full weekday in office, the Biden administration has named the next 15 drugs up for price negotiation in Medicare. Ozempic is on the list. The type 2 diabetes blockbuster drug is joined by its obesity drug cousin, Wegovy, as well as drugs for various cancers, asthma, psoriasis, and bipolar disorder. The government can't pick just any drugs in Medicare. There are certain rules laid out in the Inflation Reduction Act that say which drugs are eligible. The negotiations will take place in the coming months. Sydney Lupkin, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 400 points at 43,552. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Fire chiefs in Massachusetts continue to raise alarms over the impact of recent hospital closures on their ability to respond to emergencies. The president of the Mass Fire Chiefs Association, Michael Kelleher, raised the issue yesterday during a virtual meeting about the mutual aid system towns use to help each other in emergencies. Kelleher says the closures of Norwood Hospital and Neshoba Valley Medical Center has made for significantly longer trips to get to an emergency room.
Those ambulances are now going further. They're out of service, so we're needing to call mutual aid in to help cover some of those simultaneous calls. So as the healthcare system evolves, I think EMS needs a seat at the table to help try to navigate some of these issues, because I can tell you right now, there's a lot of pressure on the EMS system.
Last month, 13 fire chiefs around Neshoba Valley asked Governor Maura Healey for nearly $10 million to help provide emergency services following the closure of the hospital there. Well, things are about to get really loud or really quiet on Nantucket Island. A proposal that was presented during the Nantucket Select Board meeting this week suggests an island-wide ban on pickleball. The Nantucket Planning Board is the group that put the proposal on the table. If passed, it would prohibit pickleball courts in all zoning districts on Nantucket Island. As we know, the sport is immensely popular and has a die-hard fan base, and because of the noise it generates, it also is immensely unpopular. Nantucket Current reports that the proposal is just the start of a conversation about how courts could be controlled on the island through zoning. Here comes the pickleball speakeasies. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Imaginable Futures, celebrating the hard work, commitment, and achievements of the 1 in 5 college students who are parents. More at imaginablefutures.com. This is NPR.
It's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Thank you. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You're in for a real treat today. Live Music Friday is going to feature 3-time poet laureate Robert Pinsky and musician Stan Strickland. They're going to be doing poetry accompanied by Stan's incredible playing, and that's about a half hour. And later in the 12 o'clock hour, State Auditor Diana DiZoglio, the one who is trying desperately to audit the legislature. We'll find out how that's happening. Hello, Jim.
Or how it's not happening. So did you listen to the news already? They barely started. TikTok and pickleball have both been banned.
I know.
But can I say one thing before we get to the topic at hand here?
Yes.
I don't know if you were listening to the national news or just obsessing on masculinity or whatever we're going to talk about.
Yes, that's right. Toxic masculinity,
Did you hear this?
Jim?
Joe Biden said he believes the ERA is part of the Constitution because enough states have ratified it. He says he would like the archivist to publish it, which makes it formally part, but he will not direct her to do it, which, by the way, the report didn't say it. He does have the power to do. What do you make of that?
Well, I think clearly the ERA is not in the right time at this moment. We're talking about alpha males and wrestling and football and UFC. What is UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, or something like that?
Why does he not just direct the damn archivist to publish the amendment if he believes it's part of the Constitution?
Because he realizes we're in the era of the alpha male. We're going to talk about that in just a second.
Okay, let's do it. During his appearance this week on Joe Rogan's podcast, Meta CEO and born-again macho man Mark Zuckerberg sounded the alarm about what he perceives. This is just what he perceives as a masculinity crisis in the American workplace, where alpha males get overlooked, he said, undervalued, and cast aside. Here's Zuckerberg.
I do think a lot of our society has become very, like, I don't even know the right neutered or like emasculated, and there's like a whole energy in this. Just I think a lot of the corporate world is like pretty culturally neutered. There's something the kind of masculine energy I think is good, but I think corporate culture was really like trying to get away from it, and I think having a culture that like celebrates the aggression a bit more has its own merits that are really positive.
That's like an SNL routine. 877-301-8970. 6 months ago, Margie and I were talking about Tim Walz and this idea of a new era for men who could show a softer side, coach football, and share their school's gay-straight alliance. As Governor Walz did, as things stand now, a Tim Walz-style masculinity seems to be so 2024. So what do you make of this emphasis from Trump's cronies, not to mention members of his inner circle like RFK Jr., Elon Musk, on being so-called alpha males? And equally, if not more importantly, if you're a parent of son or sons, and that's the role model, are you worried about them growing up in that image and becoming the next generation of alpha males? So our topic at 877-301-8970 is the return of the alpha male and you. 877-301-8970. To say that Marjorie is obsessed with this is the understatement of the decade.
It's the backlash, the Me Too movement. We always talk about backlashes in the United States. You know, Jimmy Carter, who just died, he was elected because people thought Richard Nixon was a crook, and that went back and forth. And then a lot of people weren't ready for a black president, so then Trump got picked after Barack Obama. So it's a backlash. But you know, it's a lot about Trump. I mean, let's face it. I don't mean to pick on Mark Zuckerberg, but
feel free. It's fine.
You know, since he's decided he's not going to fact check on Meta and let out all these wild, horrible, harmful things on his site, and he's
hate speech is okay. No more DEI.
It's fine. I would have to say that the poster boy for alpha maleness probably should not be Mark Zuckerberg, although he started growing his curls out. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
He's doing a Samson
Looks
thing
fabulous.
like in the Bible.
Yeah.
He's not really the guy that you talked about to celebrate aggression, but look what he's doing. He's putting that guy, Dana White, good friend of Donald Trump's. He's from that UFC Ultimate Fighting thing. And if you look at the influence of young men in this election, it was huge. Young men listening to these bro podcasts. And Trump went on all these bro podcasts, and he went on one with this guy named Theo Vaughn, and Theo Vaughn asked him what he thought were the best qualities of his children. And he started out talking about how Don Jr. and Eric were extraordinary hunters. That was the thing he really liked, that they were going out to these safaris, and they were shooting all these hunters, and they showed them with their catch stuff. That was great. I mean, I don't know if that would be the first thing you might say about your kids, that they were big hunters. And then, of course, he went on Joe Rogan's show, and a lot of these bro podcasts, Trump talked about wrestling and football and that UFC thing that he loves, and that Dana White thing. So it was all about these like ultra male kind of things, and it just seems like it might be in general for a lot of us a little much, just a little bit much.
So you have a son.
And the bullying.
You have a son who is grown.
Yes, I do.
So he's a little boy, and let's assume he's a little boy. I have two daughters. Your son grows up in this era where people seem to love what Donald Trump defines as strength.
Right.
We'll have Barack Obama's version in a minute, which includes not telling the truth, having absolutely no empathy for anybody. Sexual assault is perfectly okay.
Bullying.
And both you,
Don't forget the bullying.
Bullying, and that's so. What do you do with your kid other than tell your kid that you should be moral and tell the truth? What do you do?
Well, Jim, you and I are old enough to remember the dilemma in the Clinton era when you had your teenage children, if you had teens at that time, coming home and telling you that oral sex wasn't sex, because that's what Bill Clinton...
My younger daughter was 4 at the time, and she walks into the living room and she says, "What did he do?" What did he do?
To Monica Lewinsky. So, I mean, as somebody Lindsay Karp wrote a great piece in the Huffington Post talking about this, the dilemma she's having with her sons, because this is not, the person that's running the country is not exemplifying the kind of qualities she wants to see in a man. But you know something? I think Jason from Plymouth, thank you for this, Jason, because I think you have captured this. I've always said, says Jason, if you need to tell people you're an alpha or you're tough or you're a real man, you are probably not. Wish these people would deal with their insecurities in ways that leave all of us out of it. But this is where we are now. We're going to have on the dais, however you say that, at the inauguration on Monday, we're going to have a whole thing of these really billionaire tech bros.
Did you see the photo of the rehearsal? On the seats it says alpha male sit here. Did you know that? That's the alpha male. 877-301-89. Can we play Barack Obama?
Yes.
I remember, I hope you'll remember this. This is Obama. He said it a lot, but this is from a speech in Pittsburgh. When he's responding, a lot of the people, young men particularly, said they're voting for Trump, said they liked the fact that he was strong, that he was tough. And here is Barack Obama's definition of strength.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, the bullying and the putting people down, is a sign of strength. I am here to tell you that is not what real strength is. Real strength is about working hard and carrying a heavy load without complaining. Real strength is about taking responsibility for your actions and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient.
I'll tell you, that was about as beautiful as it gets. Obviously didn't have much of an impact. 877-301-8970. We're talking about the rise of the alpha male, really officially starting Monday.
And do we need more masculine energy in the corporate world? Has the corporate world been neutered, as Mark Zuckerberg, the alpha male spokesman,
What is he talking? 90% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 are men.
And meanwhile,
how much more do you need?
Don't forget, we have an example on one side of the alpha male. That's everybody in the blue suits with the red ties, and I guess they do a lot of testosterone like RFK Jr. does. He's big into his testosterone regime. But then they have the other side, the women. And the women in this era, everybody has to wear spike heels, really high heels. I don't know how these women do it. I couldn't wear those heels when I was like 18. And Pam Bondi, who appeared yesterday, she's going to be the Attorney General. You have to have false eyelashes, I guess, if you're going to be in the cabinet.
Really
Kristi
bad.
Noem this morning, very high heels, false eyelashes. Pam Bondi yesterday. Trad wives are huge online. Everybody's looking for these so-called traditional wives and Mormon wives. In the olden days, a Mormon husband could have many wives. That's been outlawed in the United States of America. But I guess that's the appeal of Mormon wives, one man and several
They don't do it anymore.
wives.
Give them a break.
Well, it's against the law.
Okay, well, that's a good
It's
reason.
against the law. But
By
this
the
is
way,
a fantasy, Jim. You got to get with the program here.
By the way, we're going to have to try to squeeze in callers because, as you see, Marjorie's on fire. At our staff meeting this morning, she would not stop talking.
Well,
because this is just...
Some people might say the masculine energy you want in your house is somebody who's going to take out the garbage, he's going to mow the lawn, he's going to do the shoveling, he's going to take care of the male. Well, alpha males can't take care of children because
they cannot.
That lowers their testosterone levels, Jim.
Yeah.
Okay?
Exactly.
877
Most days, Donald Trump knows the names of all of his children, which is actually quite... Didn't you tell me that Hegseth didn't know the name of his seventh kid the other day?
He's got 7 kids. He was stumbling over the name of number 6 and number 7. He finally came up with the names, I think, but it was difficult for him. 877-301-8970. What do you think, Roger in Marblehead? Hi, Roger.
Hello, Roger.
Hi, good morning, guys.
Hi.
Well, I want to say that you're missing one of the benefits of toxic masculinity.
What is it?
Because I just won the federal contract to have kegerators installed in the White House and all federal buildings.
Say that again.
Kegerators.
Kegerators. Oh, okay. That's good.
Clearly, the American people voted to have the next 4 years as one giant frat party.
Yeah, well...
We don't have any serious problems to address.
Well, Trump doesn't drink. That is the one missing ingredient of the sort of stereotypical alpha male, the Hegseth, Kavanaugh, of course, cried at the hearing.
I like beer.
That's not quite.
I like beer.
Well, that was the SNL routine. Roger, thank you for the call. I'm sorry, you had more to say? Go ahead.
One last point is, out of sheer desperation, I ended up watching Netflix last night, Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, yeah.
And early in the movie, if you haven't seen it, J.D. Vance is getting the crap kicked out of him by a bunch of bullies. Now, he attempts to fight back, but it's actually parents or friends or somebody, adults, that come. And one of the bullies, who's laughing at him, the guy simply punches him in the stomach and knocks him down. And that's what needs to happen to Donald Trump. Somebody needs to step up and punch that mother down onto the ground. That's what this country needs in an alpha male, is somebody to knock that clown.
We got it. Okay, the Secret Service knows you mean that figuratively. Roger, thank you very much for the call. By the way, didn't Joe Biden in one of the debates, was it 4 years ago? Didn't he threaten to take Trump outside and kick his whatever?
Yeah, and I think Biden threatened to, they were going to take it outside.
Right,
and
Biden.
continue.
I just said
yeah,
Biden.
went back and forth. 877-301-8970. I'm interested, in the corporate culture world, since I think, what are we now, about 10% of the Forbes 500
I just said 90% of them are men, of the CEOs.
Men. But nonetheless, the corporate culture has been neutered. We need more.
Are you surprised?
We need to celebrate aggression, says Mark Zuckerberg.
Even if he thought this is, I don't know if he believes it, but he thought it was the right thing to say to make, I assume to sidle up to his new hero, Donald Trump. Can you believe what he's talking about? There's not enough masculine male energy in corporate America?
Okay, I'm being unkind again to Mark Zuckerberg,
That's fine,
but I don't care because he's really messed things up over there at Facebook and Meta. He is so unself-aware. He doesn't realize how ridiculous he looks and sound talking about this. It's just, my God, you should not be the spokesperson. And in these situations, I always wonder about his wife. What does she think? Mark Zuckerberg is the father of 3 daughters. His wife is a physician. I wonder what she thinks about this. Max in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, Max.
Hi.
Hi.
I should turn the radio off, right?
Oh, you should.
Thank you.
Okay, so my issue is I'm confounded by the idea that there's a mutual exclusivity between being a gentleman and being an alpha male. Whatever happened to the woman warrior? Some of the strongest people I ever met wear 3-piece suits and sip tea, but if you cross them, they're more dangerous than a UFC fighter.
Well, I hate to tell you, Maxine, not only have to turn the radio down, you have to get a new phone.
Well, I think he's talking about the gentleman.
I know.
The gentleman.
Thank you for the call. We got to let you go.
When we grew up a long time ago, you think
I remember growing up, yeah.
The cultural probably person that was the big alpha male was John Wayne, right? Mm-hmm. He was the cowboy in all those movies.
Well, Mad Men too. I mean, that's who those guys were, right? Mad Men.
Well, I guess so.
Of course so. Yeah.
The advertising. Yeah. The advertising guy. John, what's his name? John Hamm.
John Hamm, we call him, yeah.
I think mostly he was just really, really handsome, and people couldn't get over how handsome he was. It was hard to concentrate on the show. 877-301-8970.
Wait, people or you?
Okay.
Who are we talking?
Well, I would say a lot of women, perhaps, Jim.
Has anyone ever heard Marjorie talk this fast, by the way? Not only is she obsessed with this topic, to her credit, but the speed of her...
Well, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's like, do we have to talk about football and wrestling and UFC fighting?
You know who love alpha males? White women. White women voted for alpha male leadership overwhelmingly on November 5th.
I'm a white woman.
I'm aware you're white. I didn't say every white woman.
Every white woman. But it was, unfortunately, a more than a majority of white women, which we're going to talk about later.
You know what's interesting, by the way, an anonymous texter, the text just disappeared. I'm a fan of Joe Biden's, even though his decision, of course, to stay in too long was too long and was really problematic. But the texter said, which is interesting, we're talking about him he wants the archivist to publish the ERA, but will not direct it. I mean, and the anonymous texter says, what a perfect juxtaposition. We're talking about alpha males. He believes it's in the Constitution, but won't direct. You think Donald Trump would stop at this? I'll urge you to do this. People want it, even if it's illegal. They like this tough guy, macho, uninformed, truth-defying crap.
But I think really, when you think of this sort of ideal alpha male, it's someone who's not a bully, not making fun of people with disabilities, not making fun of people who are lesser.
That's not the alpha male in 2025.
But I think that is it. But that is, I think, if you are not into this weird thing of this Trump thing, I think that would be
well, by the way, you can't call something a weird thing when a plurality of the American people embrace that weird thing. It is the thing.
Of course you can.
Well, it's the thing.
Okay.
Of course you can disagree with it.
John Hamm has been awarded the Hasty Pudding Man of the Year. He'll be in town January 1st. I guess I have to take the day off that day, Jim. Anonymous texter
It's like when Marjorie ran after Bill Clinton at the Democratic Convention. I've told the story before.
I didn't run after him.
Yes, she did.
I was wrapped in the cable.
After she said that, who cares? cares that Bill Clinton's here. He walks down the hall where we're stationed. She starts running after him. She gets caught in the cable. And were you this close to dying by strangulation?
I was almost strangled by the television cable. Yeah, going backwards down the hallway. We have a few good texts here. Marjorie and Jim, imagine a world where he had all the confidence of a mediocre white man. I like that.
It's a good text. DEI is out and DUI is in, which that is a pretty clever line.
Speaking of Vice President Vance, someone should tell him alpha males do not wear eyeliner. That's
Do you notice, by the way, we have to take a break. Before we take a break, Jamie, I think, or Aiden, or somebody pointed out to us this morning, do you notice that Vance's physical posturing with his body has changed dramatically? And in the rare moments when you see him standing with Donald Trump, which is almost never, he stands in exactly the sort of condescending sort of way, the tough guy thing that Donald Trump does. You should check out the photos.
No, that's very true.
Thank you.
Rod from Lowell says, to address the caller who wants to have someone put Trump down, I nominate Sue O'Connell.
Yeah, it's because Sue O'Connell was on our show the other day, threatened to punch out Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
She did.
Was saying she could take him, and I think she's probably right. Sue, after all, comes from the mean streets of Revere. Okay, we're talking about this new era of the alpha male. Do you think this constant obsession on beating people up, bullying people, wrestling, ultimate fighting is a little bit much? Would you just like the alpha male in your life to stick to taking out the garbage? We're going to take a quick break, but we'll return in just a moment. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Only a fraction of stand-up comics are successful enough to make it a full-time gig, so it's understandable that one comic's mother wasn't sure about her son's career choice. But she warmed up to it once he convinced her to join the act.
We went on a chat show, and in front of a studio audience, she still stole the show, and then I thought, okay, I've created a monster.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting McLeat, live at Berkeley Performance Center on Saturday, February 1st. McLeat refracts American funk, soul, indie pop, and jazz through traditional Ethiopian styles. Tickets at celebrityseries.org. And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. State Auditor Diana DeZaglia will join us. Not only will she be talking about her ballot question, which won a mere 71% of the vote. I think she's going to sing for us again. And on Monday, MLK Day, we'll celebrate that, and we'll provide special coverage of the inauguration. If you're just tuning in, we're getting your thoughts on this conversation, inspired by Zuckerberg on the Joe Rogan podcast, about so-called masculinity crisis, as he describes it in America, and the rise of the alpha male in politics, work everywhere. We want to know if you can tell us what that actually means and what you think it tells us about what the next 4 years are going to look like in general and in your household if you've got a young son or daughter, actually. Give us a call or text at 877-301-8970. The reason I had a daughter, do you remember what we were talking about yesterday? When Nancy Mace, the Republican from, I think, South Carolina, was upset with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, what did she threaten to do?
Take her outside. Take her outside.
I mean, it's sort of alpha male in a woman's body kind of thing.
They go outside and pull each other's hair out in the parking lot outside the Capitol.
Well, I mean, that's not Crockett did not propose it. Mace proposed. That was the solution to their disagreement over reinstating a civil rights subcommittee for whatever committee they both sit on.
Okay, here's Betsy in Nashua. My boyfriend is a 52-year-old sensitive man who drives a little electric Nissan Leaf. And he's getting more action than any alpha male I know, if you know what I mean.
Who says action in 2025?
Well, Betsy in Nashua does. She says, being soft-spoken and a good listener is more of a turn-on to me. How about that? We have a couple of people who are worried about their young children.
They should.
Yeah, 15-year-old grandson, kind, sensitive boy. I'm terrified this new culture will ruin him. I can only hope I taught him to be strong enough to believe in himself and his core values. And Ronnie in Danvers says, a real man speaks softly and carries a big stick. Unless he's manosphere, alpha male, losers think they're more masculine than Teddy Roosevelt.
Let's go to Tim in Marlboro. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling, Tim. Hi.
Hi, how are you guys today?
We're
Fine,
well,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Great. So I just wanted to make a comment on how you folks are even approaching this topic, because what I'm hearing is a lot of I don't understand. And part of that, I think, is turning off the conversation that you want to have with the gentlemen, the young boys who are maybe turned on to these ideas.
Okay,
Marjorie, you talk about Theo Vaughn as just some guy, but he is one of the most popular comedians and podcasters with a huge audience. So if I'm not one of these people, but if I were a young Republican male hearing this conversation, I would say, not only does Marjorie not know what she's talking about, she has no respect for it.
Okay, well, you want me to get serious for a minute, Tim? You know why I think people are attracted to Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and all that? I think it is because of basic insecurity of young men in their lives. They're having difficulty in school. They're not getting the degrees. They're not being able to make enough money. They're concerned about supporting their family. So they've become attracted to these because of the things maybe not working out as well in their lives as they want them to. They've been attracted to these podcasts. You know, Joe Rogan is a talented guy. Theo Vaughn is a talented guy. Some of these other people are very talented. But I don't think what they're talking about are the values that you really want these young men to aspire to. So I get it. They don't make enough money, and they feel bad.
Tim?
The Theo Vaughn's podcast have you listened to, Marjorie?
You know, Tim, I'm not crazy about this tact. If you listen to this show,
enough.
I would say
Tim,
Marjorie
enough.
gets this about 1,000 times more than you do. We've talked about it since long before Election Day. Tim, thank you for your call.
Thank you for the call. But the important thing to remember, too, about the podcast...
How many times have you listened to the
enough
podcast?
to know the basic thrust of him and Rogan. And the thing that I've said before about a lot of them is when there is some serious thing, like a policy thing or a question, or when Trump gets on Rogan and lies.
They're fact-free.
I don't know if Rogan doesn't know enough to correct him or if he doesn't want to ruin the mood by correcting him, but that's one of the problems, that the falsities and the lies that Trump has been telling get a free rein, I guess, on a lot of these podcasts. There's very few of them that correct him.
Let's go to Deb in Boston. You're on Boston Public Radio. We really appreciate your calling. Hi, Deb.
Hey, I think Marjorie had it. She said that these guys, this billionaire pack, they're just very, self-unaware.
Yeah.
They have no self-awareness.
Yeah.
And they don't really care to learn anything emotional. It's like they have an emotional deficiency. They don't have the ability to see the whole spectrum of emotions. They have no access to them. And some of them are so blind to it. And I think it's pretty epidemic in the male community overall. I know a lot of males in my life have no idea what women are talking about when we are talking about things that matter, emotional content or whatnot. It's just I don't know if they didn't get what they needed when they were children, but they just are lacking the ability to access the emotions that allow the rest of us to care and have compassion and want to be connected on a deeper level.
Hey, Deb, you said, I don't know if they got enough when they were kids. Did you ever see Michael Kirk Frontlines, The Choice, which runs every 4 years? It's up to 2 hours on each of the candidates of the major parties, and he's obviously done now 2 on Donald Trump and his upbringing. Did you ever see that?
I have not.
I would, for those who have, and I would urge you, if you have the time, I think it says exactly what you're suggesting that was missing, is still missing in the man, but obviously, a plurality of the American people are perfectly fine with that. That was a great call, Deb. Thank you for making it.
And by the way, the young people that are struggling now, you got to have a lot of empathy too, because you can't make enough money to pay your rent, to support a family, even when there's 2 people together. You can't afford to have children. I mean, we have a terrible income inequality problem in this country, which is ironic that those people voted for someone who is not going to deal with the income inequality problem that is really doing a number in the United States of America. Anyway, Charlotte in Gloucester, thank you for calling.
Oh, hey, Charlotte, how are you?
Hi, I'm just so glad to talk. And Marjorie,
yes,
your pitch of speaking and the speed makes me so happy.
Well, somebody said I have to talk fast before women like me aren't allowed to talk anymore, Charlotte.
Oh my God!
Go ahead, Charlotte.
So you're singing my song. I wanted to say that I write about women in history, and I've had to sort of imagine, what was it like to be called, ugly, a man, woman, for speaking up for women's rights? And I did a lot of imagining, and now we're living in the same era, it feels like. I don't have to imagine anything. It's right there.
It's a great point, Charlotte.
Hey, Charlotte, do you mind if we, since you say you write about that, I know who you are, do you mind if we say what your full name is and people might want to read some of your work?
Oh, Jim, that's nice.
Charlotte Gordon is who Charlotte is, and she's written some spectacular award-winning things, and you're great. Charlotte, it's great to talk to you.
I didn't realize Jim Browdy had immersed himself in the issue of gender conflict here, Jim. This is a new side.
Well, I did because you told me I had to, so I figured I had to. Charlotte, it's great to talk to you.
Charlotte,
thank you for calling in.
Very
we really
much for this
appreciate
call.
it.
Listen to this. Leola from Norwell says, I saw a truck outside Lowe's that had a sticker on it that said, I am not a Trump supporter. I just need a truck to haul things. That's something we talked about during the campaign. If you saw these big pickup trucks with the American flags on the side, you thought, maybe you might be in a little trouble there.
You remember, I rear-ended a Trump pickup truck with a big Trump flag. Where was that? Right outside Mar-a-Lago. Last year when I called it into the show from Mar-a-Lago.
I didn't know it was a big Trump car. Did you tell me that?
It was a pickup truck with a big Trump flag and a big American flag. I rear-ended the truck. Of course, the truck was not a dent, and the car that I had borrowed that I was using crumpled. So I think that...
Weren't you driving some hot little sports car, Jim?
I was driving our friend's car, whose house I was staying in.
What kind of car was it?
I don't want to say.
Porsche?
Porsche.
Maserati?
It wasn't mine. It was borrowed from a friend, but it is no more, thanks to that little encounter. We're done, Marjorie.
Oh, we are done. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just getting started here, and we're already done, but we got something great coming up after this. Quick break. Live Music Friday comes courtesy of three-time United States Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky, who's got a show tomorrow night at the Charles Hotel Regatta Bar, and he's going to be joined by musician, songwriter, longtime accompanist, if you can even call him that. They do music and poetry together. Stan Strickland. They are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Music Worcester, presenting the premier concert brass ensemble, the Rodney Marsalis Philadelphia Big Brass, performing at Mechanics Hall Friday, January 24th at 8. Tickets at musicworcester.org. It's the story of one of the most curious men in history. This two-part series from Ken Burns delves inside the mind of the 15th century polymath. Don't miss Leonardo da Vinci, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Mark Dregan. We're live at the Boston Public Library stream, youtube.com/GBH News. At noon today, we'll be joined by leaders of the BayState Banner, and at 12:30, the Auditor of the Commonwealth will give us an update in person on her effort, backed by the voters of Massachusetts, to audit the least transparent legislature in America. Welcome to another edition of Live Music Friday. Here with us and ready to perform ahead of a show with his band at the great Charles Hotel's Regatta Bar, three-time U.S. Poet Laureate and William Fairfield Warren Distinguished Professor at Boston University, Robert Pinsky. And you might be confused why we're introducing a poet for Live Music Friday. It all makes sense in a couple of minutes. Accompanying him today is multi-instrumentalist Stan Strickland. associate professor at Berkeley, co-director of Express Yourself, and that's a multicultural organization servicing emotionally distressed youth through arts. We'll talk about that too. Tomorrow night, Robert and Stan, with a few other members of Robert's band, perform Robert's poem Jazz at the Regatta Bar at the Charles Hotel. For information and to secure tickets, which are nearly sold out, so move quickly, you can go to regattabarjazz.com. But first, here's Robert Pinsky and Stan Strickland performing The Want Bone.
The tongue of the waves told in the earth's bell. The tongue of the waves told in the earth's bell. Blue rippled and soaked in the fire of blue. The dried mouth bones of a shark in the hot swale gaped on nothing but sand on either side. The bone tasted of nothing and smelled of nothing. A scalded, toothless harp, uncrushed, unstrung. A scalded, toothless harp, uncrushed, unstrung. The joined arcs made the shape of birth and craving, and the welded open shape, that welded open shape, kept mouthing, oh. The joined arcs made the shape of birth and craving, and the welded open shape kept mouthing, oh. Ossified cords held the corners together. Ossified cords held the corners together in groined spirals, plaited like a summer dress. But where was the limber grin, the gash? Where was the limber grin, the gash of pleasure? Infinitesimal mouths bored away. Infinitesimal mouths bored away. The beach scrubbed and etched and pickled it clean. The beach scrubbed and etched and pickled it clean. But oh, I love you, it sings. I love you, oh, my little, my country, my food, my parent, my child. I want you, my own. Oh, my flower, my fin, my life, my lightness, my oh.
Robert Pinsky, could you join us? That was terrific. And if you want to check them out with a little bit larger band tomorrow night at the Regatta Bar at the Charles Hotel. Again, it's regattabarjazz.com. Not many tickets left, so if you want to go, and I would if I were you, I would check it out quickly. That was terrific, gentlemen. Great to have you here. Thanks so much.
You know, before I knew about your doing this together, I thought, why would someone recite poetry along to music? And now that I've heard it, of course, I think, why didn't I always know about this? How did this happen? Robert, let's start with you.
Marjorie, if someone had described this to me, I would have said that sounds awful. Sounds so corny. I started off wanting to be a musician. In my high school graduating class, I was not voted most literary boy, I was voted most musical. And I had the joy, I played mostly saxophone, And I had the joy of playing with other musicians, local dances and bars and things. And I thought that joy was gone from my life forever. And then, thanks to Pauline Bilski and Rockalam Bob Moses and other people around here, with Stan, one of the first, I got the great pleasure of working with people like Stan and Lawrence Hobgood, who will be playing with us tomorrow night. And Lawrence was musical director for a singer who had used one of my poems as a... Anyway, one thing led to another.
Were you surprised when you first got turned on to this, that this works? By the way, I was reading a lot of your poems last night. I happened to have read One Bone, and it was great last night. It was otherworldly with Stan playing with you. Was this surprising that this kind of thing works so well and fits so perfectly? Well, let's say Stan, the instrumentalist here. How about it?
It wasn't surprising for me because I've worked with actors and having one-man play myself. But to be with Robert was a whole other level of, literacy.
What is that level?
It's hard to describe, but, we're doing this collaboration of words and sound and rhythm and all the things that are involved in music and poetry. But we're always on the edge of not being sure of where things are going to happen. It reminds me of the conversation you've been having earlier about this whole macho man.
Yeah.
One way that I talk about it is that we are mesmerized by the hierarchy of the rational mind. And so we're under this sway of this idea of dominance, this patriarchal dominance. So all this stuff that's going on is really a logical backlash to historical things.
That's the voice of Stan Strickland. We're talking to him and Robert Pinsky.
We described you, we should, and I made a mistake before, multi-instrumentalist. So we saw a couple of instruments over there. How many instruments do you play, Stan?
Most of the woodwinds, primarily saxophone, flute, bass, clarinet.
Yeah.
But one of my favorites is coming up. It's a little African thumb piano called a kalimba.
Okay.
What is it? We'll see it. We'll hear it. What is it? What is it?
Well, in different parts of Africa, there are lots of wonderful percussion instruments. And I would say that the Shona people of Zimbabwe play an instrument called the mbira, which is sort of a keyboard that you play with your fingers and your thumbs. And the idea of it is to create this state of concentration and focus where your energy is allowed to ascend.
Can't wait. Are you more satisfied, Robert Pinsky? If I had said to you, can you go, I know recite is a horrible verb, can you go read, perform the One Bone, and you did it by yourself, and then you came back and did it with Stan, are you more fulfilled when you're doing it in that kind of combination?
The difference is much less to me than it might be to you.
Why?
Because I hear singing for the consonants and vowels, and I hear poetry for the music. The macho hero for me when I was young, and I'm very old, was Sid Caesar, who was a great, great seminal comic who knew how to make fun of alpha males and the alpha male sycophants, and he had it all. And in his autobiography, that great artist says, comedy is music. I knew what he was talking about. We have tomorrow night, we have the great Cuban percussionist Francisco Mela, and when Stan talks about long vowels, I remember the moment that in retrospect tells me I was not going to be a musician, but a poet. In Spanish class, we would sing, Ya las gaviotas tienen sus alas, abren sus alas, para volar. And I remember thinking, instead about the tune or the meaning of the words, that alas is too long, Las gaviotas tienen sus alas, abren sus alas, para volar. And those open vowels of Spanish were what I was thinking about. So when you hear me read my poem, or when you read it in your own imagination, you may not hear the music as much as I do because I've given my life to it.
Yeah, you mentioned how old you are. Is Springsteen going to be there tomorrow night too? I mean, I learned watching you and Springsteen, you were born in the exact same hospital in Long Branch, Jersey. Is that where it was?
Long Branch, New
10
Jersey.
years apart. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a kid, so you're sort of a kid kind of thing, right?
Yes, and working with Bruce was not as different as you might think from working with Lawrence, Stan, Francisco.
Can I tell you something? I watched the video a long time ago, then I watched it again last night, and you as a participant probably didn't appreciate this. You would think, Robert Pinsky, pretty big deal, Bruce Springsteen, oh my God, he was in awe of you. Did you feel that? I know you can't say that, but tell the truth. He was in awe of you. When he was performing your stuff, I mean, it was this incredibly beautiful kind of thing. Tell the truth. You saw it, didn't you?
All of the best artists of any kind I've ever met are interested in art. And if it seems as though we're being celebrity chasers of one another, that's not it. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I would talk to my friend Mike Mazer and learn about visual art from Mike, working with Bruce, working with the great comic and The Simpsons, it was not, I mean, the word poetry is sort of, gets a lot of hollow worship. But
he did perform with Lisa on The Simpsons, if people haven't seen that.
Well, I will mention, Lisa does know my work.
That's right. She does know your work. We're talking with three-time poet laureate Robert Pinsky and Stan Strickland, who's at Berklee College of Music, and he's also a multi-instrumentalist, performed with the Boston Pops, Take Six, Herbie Mann. You've also, with the Village People that are going to be at the inaugural, I believe, this Monday. But you also do something I found fascinating. Tell people about Express Yourself, what that is.
Express Yourself is a fabulous organization in Beverly, Massachusetts that serves youth with emotional, mental difficulties. And it's an intermodal, multicultural organization. Every year we do this fantastic performance at the Wang Theater, and everyone is invited, May 22nd. And we have guest artists like the Blue Man Group, people from Stomp. This year we have a fabulous drum group, the Drumline Pack, and it's a fabulous show. Part of our inspiration is to destigmatize mental health through building community and through the power of the arts.
By the way, you're performing, in addition to tomorrow night altogether, you're at the Wang on May 22nd.
Yeah, May 22nd,
correct?
yes.
Stan Strickland at the Wang. You know, by the way, I made a big mistake. When I mentioned The Simpsons, we're getting flooded with text, so we got to play it. Here's a little piece of this poet laureate guy on with Lisa on The Simpsons. Here's a little piece of it. Here it is. We don't have it.
Oh, you don't have it.
Oh, we almost had it.
Okay. So,
technical problem,
well,
sorry.
if we get that, we'll play it. But I just wanted to ask you, you can imagine now in 2025, if your kid was going to college and your kid said, what do you want to do? And they said, I want to be a poet. And mom and dad would say, oh my God, get an engineering degree or something and do it on the side. How did it happen for you? I mean, you're a three-time poet laureate. This has been your career. How did it start?
It all has to do with music, and I never was an all-A student. When I was 13, I was in the dumb class. I couldn't do my homework. And I think my mom and dad, who had their own problems anyway, just that I was not in jail. They were
New Jersey, after all, you know.
Well, in fact, yes, my father's father was a criminal.
Is that right?
Yeah, technically it was the Prohibition. He was in the liquor business.
Oh, okay.
So they were not stereotypical Jewish parents who wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. And they were show-offs. They were very good dancers. They were famously good-looking people. And that I was having fun. They thought I was playing music. I was still going back home to the Jersey Shore to play for a few months. And I would stink up the place for my comrade musicians. I shifted to the poetry thing. I have 8 grandkids now.
Wow.
And they seem to enjoy things like poetry and music. One of them is a terrific he's like classical and bluegrass guitar. And I think the emphasis on professional training, which is really seeping into universities big time, I think it's the kind of thing that wears itself out for individuals and in general.
We found the Simpson bite. Here it is.
Open your minds for the Coltrane to the Quatrain, the Tony Danza of the A.B. stanza. I give you the former Poet Laureate of the United States, Mr. Robert Pinsky.
That's pretty fabulous. That is pretty great. Hey, can you describe, we talked about a wonderful project that your colleague Stan is doing here. Tell us about this favorite poem thing, which I think is spectacular.
It's great.
What is it?
I think it's the best public art project there is.
Great.
Favoritepoem.org. You will see not poets reading their poems, not actors, not professors of poetry, readers. You'll see a construction worker reading Walt Whitman. You'll see a photographer reading a poem by Langston Hughes. People of all different walks of life, and mostly not particularly famous people. And we didn't create them, and they are that supposedly non-existent character, the American who loves poetry and knows poetry. So I can show you a glass blower. The Langston Hughes poem is read by, she was then a high school student in San Jose, California. She's a Cambodian American kid. She tells the horrible experiences of her family fleeing Pol Pot. So the human stories, and then those people, the construction worker or the MD or whoever, talks about the poem by Rilke or Maya Angelou or Elizabeth Bishop.
It's so accessible because you can see the list of poets, you can see the list of the poems that are going to be read, and then you see they're produced. The one with the custodian that I was watching right before last night.
The high school custodian.
Yes, I love that one. He shows him getting ready to school in the morning for the kids, and the kids coming into school, and then he's in his room with all the wrenches hanging up on the wall, reading a poem. It was great. It was just made it easy for people that think that they're intimidated by poetry, which I think some people are.
Marjorie, you said it.
Stan, what are you two going to perform in about a minute here? What's the next thing? Or you, Robert, whoever, what are you performing? They're looking at each other. They apparently don't know what they're performing.
Samurai song. Yes.
Samurai song. I listened to Springsteen do it last night. He's not bad at that either. But,
he turned out to know the poem very well.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Robert Pinsky and Stan Strickland, if you want to return to your place. Again, they'll be at the Regatta Bar with a bunch of their bandmates tomorrow night. You go to regattabarjazz.com. And as we said, Stan will be at the Wang on May 22nd. So you have two wonderful things to look forward to. I love Samurai Song, by the way, and I'm really dying to hear it.
It's one of his most famous poems, I think.
And here they are, Robert Pinsky. We should say Cantabrigian, because that also matters in my world. Robert Pinsky, Stan Strickland, doing Samurai Song. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Hey, la 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 la. Baba do dum de down. Baba do dum de down. Baba dum dum de. Baba dum dum de
Samurai Song. When I had no roof, I made audacity my roof. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no eyes, when I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no thought. When I had no thought, I waited. When I had no father, I made care my father. When I had no mother, I embraced order. When I had no friend, I made quiet my friend. When I had no enemy, I opposed my body. When I had no temple, I made my voice my temple. I have no priest, my tongue is my choir. When I have no means, fortune is my means. When I have nothing, death will be my fortune. Need is my tactic. Detachment is my strategy. When I had no lover, I courted my sleep. When I had no roof, I made audacity my roof. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no thought, I waited.
You just heard three-time United States Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky. Wow. He's performing tomorrow night, and as he just did for us now, with multi-instrumentalist Stan Strickland at the Charles Hotel Regatta Bar.
Israel and Hamas are one crucial step closer to ending their 15-month-old war in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved a multi-phase ceasefire deal, which is expected to go before the full cabinet later today.
The plan is for that fighting to stop for at least 6 weeks. Over that time, 33 of the remaining 98 hostages should be released, and around 1,000 Palestinian detainees are expected to be released as well. There's also supposed to be a significant increase in the flow of much-needed humanitarian aid to Gaza, and also in that time, negotiations for the next phase of this deal will also take place, in the hopes of continuing the ceasefire with more releases and the withdrawal of more Israeli troops.
NPR's Kat Lonsdorf. As Trump prepares to take office, U.S. Customs and Border Protection says apprehensions are down dramatically. The reality on the ground, more complicated. Here's NPR's Jasmine Garst.
Cindy Alamy is from Colombia. She and her husband owned a small store there. She says the local gang extorted them, so they headed north. The plan was to hire a coyote, that's a smuggler, to get them over the U.S. border. They were encouraged to instead try getting an appointment using CBP One, an app to legally request entry into the U.S. She says they've been trying to get the appointment for 5 months.
Sí, porque imagínese ya viene 20 de enero y
January 20th is almost here, she says, when President Trump takes office. He's vowed to shut down the CBP One program and reinforce the border. She's starting to reconsider hiring a smuggler.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. Meteorologists at AccuWeather say the harshest weather of the winter season is on the way to Massachusetts over the next few days. The first half of Sunday looks to be pleasant with highs in the low 40s. Then snow moves into southern New England later Sunday night and into early Monday. The region could see 1 to 3 inches of snow during that stretch, with the highest amounts in eastern Mass. And that'll be followed by a bitterly cold polar vortex that'll blanket most of the country next week. Temperatures will struggle to reach 20 degrees from Monday night into Wednesday, with overnight lows near zero and wind chills well below that. Well, a Boston rock icon and friend of Boston Public Radio was mourning the loss of his longtime roommate, director David Lynch. Lynch died Wednesday, with his family announcing the news yesterday afternoon. Peter Wolf, frontman of the Jay Giles Band, solo performer, and now author of a new autobiography, lived with Lynch in Boston when the two were students at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in the 1960s. Peter Wolf is a voracious painter. Wolf tells GBH News that the two had a lot of fun as roommates, but they had very different styles when it came to cleanliness.
We were like the odd couple. He was very neat and kept things, very much in place. And I guess to be polite, was just a slob.
If I had Wolf's voice, I would throw mine away. Wolf says the last time that he saw Lynch, they had dinner at an Italian restaurant in Los Angeles. They reminisced right up until closing time. David Lynch was 78 years old. This is GBH News.
Okay, I don't know what happened there, but we are back.
We are back.
Listen to Jim Brady, Marjorie Egan, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. This is Boston Public Radio. In a few minutes, State Auditor Diana DiZoglio is going to join us, talk about her efforts to audit the legislature. On Monday, we're going to have special coverage from the Boston Public Radio of Trump's second inauguration, which falls on MLK Day. And by the way, they've decided now they're going to have the inauguration inside because it's too cold for all the alpha males we were talking about before,
Apparently.
Jim. They don't want to be out there in the cold. I would like to point out that I went to Barack Obama's inauguration when it was so cold that my pen froze.
So they moved that inside, I assume,
They
too,
did
right?
not. We were outside.
They didn't. Oh.
We were outside, but I don't know what happened to the guys. A little too cold.
Not tough enough. In any case,
it was cold that day as
It
well.
was
Ron
cold.
was there, too. Here with us now at the interview desk is the guy who was just speaking, Ron Mitchell, co-owner and publisher of the BayState Banner, the news outlet centered around Black and Latino communities in Massachusetts. And here with him, new to us, Brigitte Williams. Brigitte is hosting their brand new Week in Review video series that launched this week. It's actually it's launching tonight. We saw a little excerpt of it before. To watch this debut broadcast and read all the reporting, of course, go to BayStateBanner.com. Brigitte, good to meet you. And Ron, great to have you as always. Great to have you guys here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, so congratulations on the new weekly show, Brigitte. And I think what I saw was talked about a West Roxbury house that was totally beautifully. That was your show, right? The house that had all the. Right. Tell us about what the show is, and tell me about that house in West Roxbury. Maybe it's for sale.
Well, the BayState Banner weekend show is really just to be able to get that streaming out there for people to get the news, understand what's going on in our community, and have it in a way that's digital and have it meet the people where they're at. People are getting their news online, on streaming services, of course on TV, but this is where we can meet them where they are, and it's really exciting to be able to do that for our community and be a part of the BayState Banner and do this with Ron.
You didn't say if she could buy the house, though.
Well, it's passive. What do you call it? It's passive something. It's all
talk about the wonderful
heat and everything else. Yeah.
So the Week in Review is really a synopsis of all of our stories that are in print, and that's a particular story about a minority-owned company that does I don't want to say reusable, but renewable energy environmental homes.
Right. It's gorgeous.
So you have solar power. So you have all the different amenities that help to cut down on the waste of energy and all that.
Yeah.
So that's really what that story was about.
And your heating bills and electric bills, et cetera.
Yes,
I love that.
So.
Another great story about this guy, Mac Hudson, by the way, because I'm really into this re-entry thing, 30 plus years incarcerated. It's a beautiful story. When we first met you and Andre, I think you came in with your legendary predecessor.
Oh, Mel Miller,
who buried the two of you in great storytelling, I should say.
He's the man. He's
one of the great storytellers ever. But I was going to say the paper, but it's not the paper anymore. That's what the whole enterprise is radically different a couple of years in. Explain what you do now and in what kind of forums you're doing it as compared to when you took over there.
Well, Mel Miller created a wonderful brand with the BayState Banner, and he stood in the breach from 1965. He told us stories about relationships he had with Martin Luther King and other folks. So he had been a civil rights activist. That's how I see him. And his paper helped to move this city forward through a whole bunch of different, decades. And when we inherited it and were able to purchase it from him, our goal was to transform it into a multimedia platform, which we've been able to do. We've increased the digital platform. They did have a website, but we've done a lot more to amp it up. And now with our new streaming newscast, as Brigitte was saying, it's our opportunity to bring news to a younger audience that doesn't do this. They don't open the paper. They don't read print anymore. They get it on their phone. They get it on their tablet. So this is a way for us to synopsize our week in review of all the news that we do and then get it out online.
But you're doing more arts, you're doing more everything.
Oh, yeah. Well, we also did relationships with various different artists in a virtual art gallery. We have partnerships with GBH. We have partnerships with other broadcast outlets. We work with the Boston Business Journal. We have partnerships with them. We have partnerships with Word in Black, which is a national news conglomerate of different Black-owned newspapers around the country. So we really tried to branch out from what Mel had done and take his legacy and expand it and give it a future and make it available in as many places locally and nationally as we can.
Could you briefly describe what the GBH collaboration is?
Well, our collaboration with GBH through various different producers, news director Lee Hill, as well as other folks within the GBH family. GBH has always made a commitment to help increase voices of various different communities within Boston. And when Andre and I purchased the paper, we inherited a mutual use agreement for print stories that pre-existed prior to us. Yahoo Miller and Ken Cooper. Ken Cooper at the time was at GBH, one of our gurus that helped us develop the new banner, as well as Yahoo Miller, the original, not the original, but the managing editor when we purchased the paper, and a longstanding writer. They had a mutual use agreement where the banner could utilize GBH stories and vice versa. It was more of a one-way situation. Now, since we took over, we've increased that to include digital content, and I'm hosting various different shows in conjunction with GBH amplifiers, where GBH is helping us amplify our voices. So it's a great mutual use agreement, and it just helps to continue GBH's commitment and the banner's commitment to different voices in our city.
Brigitte, you a local guy?
Yes, somewhat.
What did the BayState Banner mean to you before you started doing this streaming thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from central Massachusetts, the Leominster area. I came out to Boston 2017 and went to Suffolk University. And the BayState Banner is a space where you can get your news that's local. And I found that news was becoming polarized, isolated, and a lot of narratives were being regurgitated nationally. And when you can get news in your community, that's for your community, and you understand what's going on, and it's local to you, that means a lot. And I think once those things go away, we start to regurgitate information that we see online, that we see just all the time being repeated. And we want to see something that's more local to our community and makes us feel a little bit more.
By the way, Margie and I have only seen 7 minutes so far, but it's terrific, and you do a terrific job, so good luck.
Thanks very much.
Looks good. I mean, which matters, obviously, when it's a visual kind of thing.
Yes.
So, Ron, you wrote a fascinating piece about Joe Biden as he leaves the presidency and his relationship with Black America. What'd you say?
Well, Joe Biden was, as we all know, one of the youngest elected politicians, and now he became the oldest president. So he has been around for decades and decades. But Joe Biden has really been an honest player when you look at his relationship with the Black and brown community. Joe Biden, from his history, though there was a little ripple with the crime bill, and in hindsight at the time, there were a lot of Black politicians that supported it. So I don't really I don't really blame him for the negative effects of that particular bill. But there were so many other things he did over time, where being Barack Obama's vice president, providing 63 during his term, he appointed 63 Black judges, the largest amount of Black judges of any administration,
including the first Black woman of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the first Black woman of the Supreme Court, Tanya Brown
Jackson.
Thank you, Tanya Brown Jackson.
That's why I'm here.
Obviously, being thank Marjorie. Is that what you said, Marjorie? Is that what you said?
He does help me out from time to time, Ron.
Yeah. We love that, Jim. We love that.
Okay,
we love
sure.
that. Yeah. But no, Kamala Harris being his vice president. So, in my editorial, I really talked about now that he's leaving, let's take a true look at his legacy, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and everybody wants to talk about how he's terrible, the worst president. No, that's a bunk. That's a lot of bunk. He was a really great president. In history, I believe, will really treat him well, because he really achieved more than most presidents did. He took over the country after a tremendous pandemic when the prior leader was saying drink, bleach to get rid of COVID. And, he really helped to steer us out of a really tough time economically as well. And I think that the misinformation about him is terrible. And I just want to tag on to one thing that Brigitte said earlier about our new streaming news content. Our goal is to get the important information to a younger audience.
Yeah.
When we purchased the banner, the main audience was what I refer to as 40 to death. And no offense to our readers, but that, my mom, who's 85, she lives outside the country. She comes for a couple months every summer, and she used to make me save every single banner. So when she came back home to her hometown, she could read what she missed. Well, what we need to do is to get that information into the younger news audience, to younger folks, because the future of our country lies in their hands. And if they get all the information from social media companies that are dictated in sending out, and as we know, often sending out misinformation intentionally, then our young people will be making the wrong choices. And I think this election reflects the power of that social media platform in a lot of the misinformation that's out there.
Well, you're a young voter, you're a young citizen here. What was before you're doing this, well, even now, what's your primary news source through the last handful of years, like since you moved here in 2017?
Generally, the Apple News app. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, TikTok. Generally, that's where I get my news, and it's usually news outlets, but it's in short form. Long form. Generally, I'm not watching too much because going to classes, going to work, in between time, I'm getting it through those channels. And I will say that I do watch long form news, and I do get my news from the TV as well. But generally, my peers, younger people, we're on this all
Well, when
day
you're
long,
on that, and virtually all the things you're on that you described are either are in the process of dropping fact checking. Do you worry about what other particularly young? I worry about old people, but
why would we want to know that the information is true?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the benefit of knowing that the journalism you're reading is actually factual?
I'm particularly worried about young voters who are just being introduced to the media as kids, whatever. Do you worry about whether or not they're going to buy what's being sold without making sure that it's the real deal?
Yeah, I do. But also, I feel like there's a gauge and a filter that we have when we're looking at news. I think it really takes a critical thinking to go. When you're looking at some news, you have to do your own research as well. Fact checking is important. Misinformation is out there, but it takes due diligence on our end to be able to understand, to funnel out what's real and what's not, what's right and what's not. And it's hard when a lot of the misinformation is out there, and these social media platforms are sort of putting narratives out there that aren't true. But yeah, I do worry.
Do you worry? I assume you do big time.
I have two college-age boys, 23 and 20. And when Kamala first became the candidate and Biden stepped down and handed it off to her, one of my sons brought me a bunch of misinformation, and it scared me. And I was like, where did you hear that? And then here he's a TikTok and this and that. But really, really terrible, all lies about her. And it reminded me how important it is that we launched this particular streaming news service. It was always part of our banner plan to not just beef up the print, which we did, went from 22,000 to 27,000 distributed statewide. We get the website up and running, low clicks up into the couple 100,000 a month, and growing, and all the other things. And again, bringing this news to our younger audience on their cell phone, and we're going to be on all those apps that he spoke of. That's what this allows us to do, which the other all-print version of the banner didn't do.
As a guy who's doing legitimate news, and you're a young guy too, I wonder if your friends are often coming to you with stuff that you have to straighten them out on.
Sometimes. I mean, here and there. Then again, everyone has a right to their
They're going to come to him more now.
You know what I mean?
They come to you more now.
Yeah.
For sure. But everyone has a right to their own opinions, and generally amongst my friends and I, we like to talk about all of our opinions in a cordial way, and honestly, they come to me, but everyone gets their own information from their own space.
You don't annoy them. I annoy all my friends when they tell me something. This is what I do for a living all day long. I annoy them when I straighten them out. They don't want to be. They find me obnoxious, I guess, on that front. What are you doing special for the MLK anniversary?
Well, last Sunday, a week ago, 12th Baptist Church, the historic church in Roxbury, honored my co-owner and myself. And it really shocked me because I realized that I was standing and talking to the same congregation that not only did Martin Luther King speak to, but also Frederick Douglass spoke to.
Wow.
And for them to honor us really gave me a lot of faith in what we were doing. And, I was talking to my wife, Lisa Mitchell, about, as we struggle with this new company and we grow the brand and we try to get this news to a younger audience and really, help to sustain and keep Mel's legacy going another 57 or 60. This is our 60th anniversary this year. There's always a little concern, a little worry. And that, sitting on that stage, talking to that audience and feeling the love from that congregation and understanding the history of civil rights in Boston and the legacy that it brings to our country, it was just so powerful. I'm also going to the Embrace event over the weekend and the
Sunday
Martin
night
King
we'll be
breakfast.
there. Yeah.
So we will see you at a couple different events.
Yeah, Angela Davis, right?
Yeah,
Angela
speaking
Davis.
at the Embrace.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
I'm
going
very
to be
excited.
very impressive.
Amari is doing an amazing job.
Mary Paris Jeffries from Embrace Boston,
amazing.
which we had Deval Patrick on the other day, honoring the governor and his wife, honoring Governor Baker and his wife, honoring the great Irene Monroe and Dr. Thea James, and a whole bunch of other couples, actually, in the spirit of Coretta and Martin Luther King. Speaking of misinformation, Ron Mitchell, when in Trump 1.0, if we can call it that, when he said Frederick Douglass is doing a great job, you think he knew Frederick Douglass was no longer with us? I don't think so.
Obviously, he didn't. In
all seriousness, let's stay on misinformation for a minute. We have talked a lot of late with some people in the media, Brian McGrory, editor of the Globe, Jim Dow is the editorial page editor of the Globe, Marty Barron used to be editor of the Globe and the Washington Post. When Jeff Bezos killed the Kamala Harris endorsement, I hope people, if they had killed a Donald Trump endorsement, we'd be as unhappy, that kind of interference. The same thing at the Los Angeles Times. I think the Washington Post is one of the great papers in America. People are quitting in large numbers, critical columnists, reporters, and that sort of, this is a massive crisis in this country. And so what's the fix? I know we should be doing our research, as Brigitte said, but the reality is people are busy and we're moving. And what do we do to ensure that we are getting the straight story?
We have to require our news outlets to have what's called journalistic ethics.
Yeah.
You can't be, and I'm an owner as well, so I have to be careful what I say, but you can't allow ownership to dictate true journalism, balanced journalism, and that's what they did. And I'm glad that the folks who worked at those, legendary papers quit to make a stand. We as an audience of information have to vet, as Brigitte said. You have to vet what you hear. You have to fact check it. And now with these various different media outlets, or social media outlets anyway, removing fact checking from their websites, it's just, it's very scary. And I think that we have to just do our own due diligence, and we have to continue to push back. We survived one 4-year term of Trump. Now this looks just as scary, or even scarier in some ways. But again, we as African Americans and people of goodwill have, been pushing this country towards justice for, centuries since its inception.
Except we're going to discuss this with LaTosha Brown with Black Voters Matter in the 1 o'clock hour. But since you just mentioned, we as African American women did what they've always done. Is 92% stayed with the Democratic candidate, whether you like it or not. That's the reality, the backbone of the Democratic Party. Roughly 50% fewer black men. I think it was 13% voted for Trump the first time, black men, 24% the second time, almost 100% increase, I should have said. So what does that say to you about the state of America, particularly in light of how you feel about Donald Trump?
The first thing I would say about those facts, though they are correct, the other facts that people don't look at was Kamala Harris lost the overall vote by, I believe it was around 2%. And in each individual battleground state, she lost those states collectively, if you added them all together, I did a tutorial about this, by maybe about 250,000 votes.
She lost every one of them, Ron.
But she did, but she lost by like 50,000 here, 40,000 here, 20,000, So if you added up all those numbers, it was a very small amount in every single state. So she did lose, but it's not the landslide if you really look at the stats.
He's the president of the United States.
He is, and we have to work with him, and we have to hold him accountable.
So why did black men, and again, by the way, white women were 10 times worse, but it was significant.
Misinformation. I mean, why do people vote against their own best interests? You know,
Yeah.
What's the matter with Kansas? That great book, right?
Yeah. Why do we vote against our own best interests? The answer to that is misinformation. The answer to that is an onslaught of, I don't want to say oligarchs, but various different folks in our society who want to present things that aren't real, knowing that they're not real, intentionally trying to motivate, choices that aren't necessarily, better for the overall, as I see it anyway.
By the way, in terms of the black man, the largest percentage of flip was young black men. How do you explain that there, Brigitte?
Well, I think it's kind of along with your point on misinformation as well. I mean, there's a big thing, especially with young men in general. Young black men, there's this whole red pill, blue pill talk, And when we have algorithms where we get our information and our news, we kind of get put in this bubble of information, this sort of circle of it, and it's hard to get out of it sometimes for young men. So sometimes when they get their information through the news and through social media, through Facebook, through Twitter, they're getting circulated with that some of that red pill talk that you were talking about a little bit earlier. And young minds are impressionable. And I think that's something.
There's a certain amount of sexism, I think, too. I mean, obviously there was a problem with that with Hillary Clinton. I think the problem with that with Kamala Harris, and she had the double whammy, the racism and the sexism.
There's also the fact that people are unhappy, and that's legitimate. And I think that a lot of African American men have, for a whole host of reasons, been legitimately angry, and they want change. And when you're fed misinformation that thinks, hey, maybe if I give this guy a chance who, said Obama wasn't black, or who said Kamala Harris wasn't a black woman, maybe if I give this guy a chance, he'll make my life better. I think that if you have a hard way to go and you supported a particular Democratic Party and then you felt that they didn't help you quick enough, it's easy to assume, the other side, the grass is always greener on the other side. Let me run over here, let me give them a chance. Because folks are unhappy with some of the results. But I think the alternative, where we would be if it wasn't for Biden, where we would be if it wasn't for Democratic Party and folks of good faith, working on legislation, working on support for our society, things would be a lot worse. And it's hard for folks to see that.
Brigitte, so the thing we saw was a 7-minute tease, for lack of a better expression.
Preview.
Excuse me. A preview of the broadcast, the stream that's dropping tonight, correct?
Correct.
Give us a little taste of what people what time? Do we know what time it's happening?
It'll be up by around 8 p.m. with a little bit of luck.
I'll be asleep by 8. I'll watch it tomorrow. Okay, so
that's why streaming is so great. You watch it when you want.
Watch it when you want. What are you going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, tonight. Well, we have a multitude of different stories. We recorded one last week too.
Yeah, but this week the two different casts.
Okay,
so we're talking about, this is Martin Luther King's paper. This paper was dedicated to Martin Luther King Day. So we talk about the Embrace and what they're doing. We talk about King's legacy in relationship to health and the health crisis in America and the disparities in health. We also take a look at it as well as environmental racism. King didn't necessarily talk about environmental racism in those terms, but he talked about injustice and imbalance in the society, and that is reflected in various different ways. Where's the dump? What resources do they replace your pipes, or do you have lead pipes? Where is the money spent to make the environment that you live in better? Is there an imbalance in that? So we take a look at that. We also take a look at the Boston Public School issue and the closing of schools. And that, and when you look at that particular story, it is interesting. The city and Mayor Wu and her team get criticized for top-down thinking sometimes. But when you look at it, in some ways, some of the schools that they're closing are 80% of color, but so is the city. But then some of them that they're closing or merging are 90 or 97% of color. And the question is that an imbalance? Are they, working with schools or making decisions, that affect more people of color than other? So parents whose children are in those schools are concerned. But I think that, the city and the education and Mayor Skipper, I think they're trying the best they can. But, anytime you make change, it's tough.
We only have 30 seconds. How's the paper doing, by the way? Not the paper. How's the Enterprise doing? How's the BayState Banner doing?
The BayState Banner is doing pretty well, but listen, we can always use advertising. And as you said the first time I was here, BayStateBanner.com. You can go to our website, you can read the news, and we're growing and we're expanding, and we look forward to continuing to do that.
You're doing great work, and good luck with your show.
Well, thank you very much. Congratulations on all these great new innovations. They're wonderful. We've been talking with BayState Banner co-owner and publisher Ron Mitchell.
Say hi to Andre.
Brigitte Williams, host of the brand new Launch This Week web series, the BayState Banner Week in Review. You can check it out by going to their website, BayStateBanner.com. That is BayStateBanner.com. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Good luck.
After a quick break, State Auditor Diana DeZoglio is joining us. Yes, Jim, she'll probably sing for us.
see.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu. And Lawrence General Hospital, now united with Holy Family Hospital to help build a robust regional healthcare system defined by a shared commitment to patient-centered care and medical excellence. More at lawrencegeneral.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library. I forgot where I was. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH. I really did. It's really humiliating. In any case, here with us at the interview desk, I know who she is. She is the state auditor. Her name is Diana DeZoglio, the woman behind question 1 on the November ballot concerning her authority to audit the state legislature. That ballot question won by a narrow 71 to 28%. So I assume the legislature is complying. We'll find out. Auditor DeZoglio, it's great to see you. How are you?
Great to be back, Jim. Thanks so much, Jim and Margie.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in, Auditor DeZoglio. So tell people, just in case they don't remember, since it was only a couple of months ago, what did people vote for on the ballot question? What was the ballot question about that got such a big support from the voters of Massachusetts?
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody across the Commonwealth. Every city and town in this Commonwealth voted in support of question 1.
All 351?
To expressly allow our office to audit the state legislature in the same manner that we audit every state entity, looking at process, procedures, financial, contractual information to make sure that we have a more accountable and transparent state legislature. Unfortunately, legislators are still not recognizing that authority that was voted for in question 1. They are out of compliance with the law, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today.
Well, can we explain? Let's go break this down a little bit. So the question passes. When did it become effective? January something or?
January 3rd, I think.
Whatever.
Right?
So it's effective
It became
right
effective
now.
December 5th. However, there were some arguments about that by the Secretary of State.
But it's effective now without
and
a doubt.
now it is effective.
Okay,
yes.
so you write a letter, correct me if I'm wrong, anywhere along the way here, to the legislative leaders saying what you want to audit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what are the things that you identified as subject matter that you wanted to take a look at?
So we are looking right now simply at financial information, documents that are a matter of public record in every state entity that actually follows the public records law, and we are being denied access to that simple, basic financial documentation and contractual information right now.
And just to be clear here, without giving people a headache, it sounds to me, we haven't spoken to you since you did that, you crafted the, can I call it a demand letter for lack of a better expression, the audit description narrowly, at least from my perspective, because as the Attorney General said to us before the vote, and as the Attorney General said to us, I think earlier this week, I think it was this week, even with it satisfying one constitutional provision that could be on the ballot because of separation of powers, there may be some issues, but you drafted it in such a way that you were convinced they wouldn't run afoul of any of those issues. Is that an accurate statement?
We did that purposefully because the Attorney General has signaled some of her concerns. We, on purpose, drafted this engagement letter to focus on high-risk areas, such as these non-disclosure agreements, such as procurement information, state contracts going out from the state legislature, and financial documents, because the allegation has consistently been that these legislators are simply concerned that the violation of separation of powers is going to be the issue. Certainly, I think we all can agree that there is not even a question that these types of financial documents and contracting information would not run afoul of any constitutional provisions. So we did draft it very narrowly to start there so that we could just start doing our jobs, and we're blocked from being able to even do that.
Okay, so let's hear what the Attorney General did say to us the other day. We were talking about question 1. It was this past Tuesday. Here's the Attorney General and then me.
Before the ballot question, which I fully supported.
Did you vote for it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, okay.
So what we're looking at now is what is it the auditor wants specifically from the legislature? How are they going to respond? Once that is finalized and there is a dispute, we then have to do an analysis on who we will represent.
Okay, so we asked her to say, well, tell us what the auditor might request that you believe does run afoul of the Constitution. She said, I don't want to get into that. I want to see when the dispute is created. And I should have asked this question and I didn't, so I'll ask you. The dispute will arise and the Attorney General will decide whether or not she will side with and represent you once the legislature, assuming they do, formally says, sorry, auditor, we're not playing this game. Is that the moment where this comes to a head?
So this has already come to the point where we have a legal dispute. We have had a legal dispute with the legislature before, and during that time period, our Attorney General refused to allow us access to court, sided with legislative leaders, drafted a 17-page rebuttal to our office to defend the Senate President and the Speaker's position.
That was before the people voted.
That was, however, the process is very similar to that process, and I have tremendous concerns about that process that is going on right now because according to my team, who has gone in to meet with the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General's office is continuing to ask us about our scope, why we feel we want to look at certain things, what we plan to look at in the future, rather than simply acknowledging the law that exists, allowing us to follow the law and conduct audits in accordance with the law. The law governs how we conduct audits. The Attorney General's office does not. Similarly to how I would never go into the Attorney General's office and start dictating to her team how to pursue matters of litigation concerning the details of how that's done and why they're making the decisions that they're making in the Attorney General's office. I believe it's important that the Office of the Attorney General recognize the constitutional authority of the Office of State Auditor to conduct audits in accordance with government auditing standards, which are set forward by Chapter 11, Section 12 of the Massachusetts General Laws that dictate how we conduct audits.
What if she doesn't recognize that authority? What if she decides when a dispute, in her words, is created that you're wrong, that you don't have the constitutional power to do
Then that would be an incredible loss for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and a missed opportunity for the Attorney General to fight alongside of the people of this Commonwealth. But the scope of our audits is the decision of the Office of State Auditor's office. And frankly, my concern and why I felt it was important to come on here today, as exhausted as our team has been in continuing to have a conversation that has already been resolved on the ballot, Jim. I felt it was important to come in here today because folks need to know that we do not have a guarantee from our Attorney General's office that she is supportive of representing us in a court of law, that she is interested in enforcing this law, and I would love to see her take that opportunity to represent us, but I am concerned that that is not what's happening right now, and that they are instead potentially building a defense for non-compliance once again that could potentially seek to find some area where excuses can be made for legislative leaders to not turn over
Even
these
though
documents
she told us
again.
she voted for the question.
After elections when I win, I hear that a lot of people voted for me. And it's always great to hear that support after the fact. But this isn't about who voted for what in any particular election. This is about the job of the Attorney General's office, and that job is enforcement of the law. This is the law. If there is a dispute about constitutionality, if there's a dispute about how and why we're auditing things the way that we are, that is a matter for the courts to resolve. It is not a matter for the Attorney General's office to resolve, for the state legislature to resolve. It belongs in a court of law for a judge and the bench to decide.
Well, let me jump to a conclusion here, having read the reporting from the Globe and CommonwealthBeacon.org and the Boston Herald and Mass Live and all these people. It's fairly obvious to me what's going on here. They're stalling. I mean, the
The legislature.
The state legislature, which is ridiculously secretive. I mean, Adrian Walker, a great columnist for the Boston Globe, talked about omerta up at the State House, which, of course, is what you talk about in the mob. You know, you have to keep everything, you make promises and keep everything secret. But they're talking about ridiculous things like, you're too close to the legislature, having been a legislator before. They're talking about not making this retroactive, but going prospective. They sent out these statements with this ridiculous gobbledygook in them about what they want to do in their subcommittee, and they're going to have another subcommittee, and they need to get outside ethical people to come in. Where's that thing they said? Listen to this. Do you know what they're talking about here, Jim? This is from this subcommittee, which is made up of Sidney Friedman, Will Brownsberger, Joe Comerford, Paul Feeney.
Senators.
None of whom have access to the documents I've requested, by the way. I know, because I was a senator.
Senators.
They don't have access.
You might ask them if you're in their district what they're doing, but this subcommittee noted in this letter, this kind of directly relevant political activity may pose a conflict not only for the 2024 audit, but for any proposed audit in the near future. The advice of independent ethics experts could be helpful in carefully considering such a potential conflict. Now, what does that sound like to you?
Sounds like delay is what
delay.
It
sounds. It sounds like the constitutional scholars that we got to hear from as well, that were friends of legislators who were dragged into a hearing to hurl personal insults
This really
at my
annoys
office.
them. That's what's going on here. You really annoy them, Diana.
They're in violation of the law. I understand. There are very few people up on Beacon Hill who are not annoyed with me, irritated with me, or frustrated with me right now. And frankly, I get it. It's annoying that I take to social media and that I come on shows like this and talk about the violations of the law that are occurring up on Beacon Hill. But it is unfortunately necessary because of the continued noncompliance and defense of the status quo. And, it is unfortunate that I do have to come on these shows, but we are going through the process. They are not. And we need a judge and a court of law to decide, what's going to happen here moving forward.
We love when guests come on the show and say, it's unfortunate that I have to come on this show. We love that. So that's the auditor. Wait, Diana.
I prefer to just come on and sing.
I want to, well, you're going to in a minute. I want to explain something, because I used to do ballot campaigns when I was a lad. For those who don't understand, when you vote for something on the ballot in Massachusetts, this is not just an idea, hey, we'd like the auditor to do this. This is a law. This is now a law, thanks to 72% of the voters.
Which is enormous.
No different. Like, it's huge. Not unlike any other law that the legislature itself would pass, as the same force and effect. And we have to create a backdrop for this, which is, with all due respect to Diana DiZoglio, and I think I speak for Marguerite, it isn't that we give so much a damn about the ballot question. This is the least transparent legislature in America. We are the only state in America where the legislature, the judiciary, and the governor's office claim exemption from public record laws. This is an opportunity to pierce that thing. And what's incredible to me is the politics of this. These people know, despite all their this was historic, the media By the way, we invited the Speaker and the Senate President to come on and debate against question 1, and they refused to come, by the way. So much for transparency and the media not giving them a chance. What was I going to say here?
I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know what you're going to say.
I got so worked up. I didn't know.
The other thing about the constitutional issues, we have known about these alleged constitutional issues now since when? October? I mean, it's now. When did we first start?
The whole time. And the Commonwealth came out and made their decision.
Yeah.
Despite those objections, despite the concerns that they raised, people heard the concerns. We have very intelligent people who are, even just here today, who have heard all of the arguments from all of the different sides, and they made their decision, and we won by nearly 72% of the vote.
Let's find it. This is totally random. How many people in the audience voted for question 1 to have the auditor audit the legislature?
Well,
how many people? I hate to put you on the spot, but how many people voted against it? It's fine. If you chose not to, you chose not to. One person.
One person gingerly puts his hand up.
No, they're entitled. 2 of them, actually, and you're entitled. We appreciate you being honest about it. So randomly, but again, same sort of thing. So I want to be clear again. If the Attorney General, who says she's looking at this, waiting for a dispute to arise, whatever she said the other day, I'm not disparaging, I'm just repeating what she said. If she says at the end of the day, you don't have the power to do this, is this over?
We're going to very likely get sued by an outside group of individual citizens in this Commonwealth if the Attorney General does not choose to represent us. Now, I have heard the
saying that you're not doing what the law instructs you to do.
Yeah, my office could get sued.
Yeah, that's ironic.
And someone could sue me to say, you're not doing your job, auditor, and I would say, well, we're trying, and we could get sued.
What's this Mass Fiscal Alliance?
So Mass Fiscal Alliance, alongside of Act on Mass, and Pioneer Institute and other organizations have been talking about getting together in a bipartisan, and this is a very bipartisan coalition, because we have folks from the right, folks from the left, who are coming alongside of each other, although they normally debate each other on pretty much every other issue. They've come together on this audit issue in particular, on the side of good government, to say, hey, listen, essentially it's no longer about Democrats or Republicans on Beacon Hill. It is about a few people hoarding all of the power and telling the rest of us that we don't have access to what's happening with our taxpayer dollars. They have gotten together and said that they are, in a bipartisan fashion, looking to sue the state into compliance. And I just want to say this. Look, the Attorney General has a great opportunity here, but is instead in their office choosing to act on behalf of the courts. Now, we've heard consistently...
What does that mean?
So we've heard consistently, Jim, that, when I come on this show and when I go on any show or get anybody talking to me, well, explain yourself regarding this potential constitutional issue. I've been happy to do that. The reality is that any violation of Constitution is a hypothetical, potential, maybe someday violation that people are talking about. Our office has not violated anything. We are simply seeking to look at documents right now and do our jobs. This potential hypothetical violation of the Constitution has driven the opposition to us doing our basic job of looking at compliance in the state legislature, right? Now, something that has been violated regarding the Constitution and separation of powers has actually been done in our Attorney General's office, where I have put them on notice that they have, in my opinion, in fact and indeed themselves, violated the Constitution by previously making this decision on behalf of the court while simultaneously blocking our access. No attorney in the Office of the Attorney General is a judge. No attorney in the Office of the Attorney General sits on the bench. And when we, under law, have the right to pursue court action and take our issues to a court of law to get disputes resolved, we may ask the Attorney General's office to represent us, but we did not ever, nor are we now, asking them to settle this matter as though they are judges and as though they are on the bench. We have asked them to represent us.
Well, why are you saying they're acting like a judge? They're deciding, at least according to Andrea Campbell,
because previously,
they're deciding if you're violating the... I'm not siding with her or you. They're deciding whether or not your whatever you call it, your engagement letter crosses the line.
Because previously, they made the decision and blocked our access to the court, and they said, here's what we think the law says.
Pre-ballot question.
Yep.
When you thought you had the authority even without the ballot question.
Right, but we were denied access to a court, and the AG's office exercised the power of the bench, made the decision on behalf of the bench. That is a violation of the separation of powers. That's an exercise of the power of the judiciary. So as much as I understand that the AG's office has wanted to continue to raise potential hypothetical future constitutional issues with our office, I have asked that the Attorney General focus on not itself violating the Constitution as it has in the past and allowing us access to the courts. And if it chooses not to represent the people and instead represent the legislature, or instead throw its hands up and stay out of the matter, we are demanding access to a court this time. It's not okay that we've been denied access to the courts previously. We want our day in court. We want the opportunity to pursue justice in this matter.
Okay, we have a couple of texts here. Here's from Sheila. I love DiZoglio. What are they hiding? Just need to know where our tax money is being spent. Simple. Our state legislature is playing the Trump card. Hold off. Delay, delay, delay. Another texter wants to know what the ultimate punishment is for legislators ignoring the law. Nothing, or arrest warrants. And the third anonymous texter says, hello, I would like to marry Diana DiZoglio, please. Thank you very much.
Contact her after the show, not during the...
Been there, done that once. Not interested in doing it at any time again, anytime soon at least.
When I lost my train of thought was, you would think that when you have a legislature that is held in such low regard by the voters, in great part, I don't mean because of your question, in general, when you see it, in great part because of their utter lack of transparency, naively, one would assume the first thing they do, even if they had legitimate concerns, is try to figure out how can we do this so that we do allow the auditor to do her job, so we can make a statement to the public. We're not hiding out. We're not going to refuse to tell you how you're represented or voted in a committee anymore like we have before. We're not going to do no roll calls on major legislation. So it is so, in my opinion, again, whether you voted no or voted yes, no, it doesn't. This is the law of Massachusetts. It is so condescending and disrespectful to people who have a legitimate concern about lack of transparency to not say, once we agree on the items, come on down. In any case, so if people want to learn, what do they do if people want to, they should call their legislators, I assume, right?
Call your legislators, call the Attorney General's office. I heard there's a lot of frustration in the Attorney General's office with me in particular right now. That's okay. Please continue to call the Attorney General's office. Call my sisters in service. Call the governor of this Commonwealth, who I work very well alongside of both of these women.
Andrea Campbell, if I remember correctly, was quite complimentary of you.
Absolutely, and I have compliments to give back. I very, very much respect these women. I work with these women on a host of various issues. I also do need to be able to stand up on an issue where we have not been able to come to a full agreement on yet, and I need your support to get us there, friends. So please call the governor of this Commonwealth, call the Attorney General, let them know that their sister in service was on GBH today asking for their support. Last night at the Governor's State of the State, we heard about so many great things.
They make you sit in the hall?
And not this time.
Okay.
It was a folding chair last time, but this time, I was quite literally, we brought up the folding chair because I did get kicked off the podium. They got to bring me back up. It was quite the scene. But this time I had a seat. It was, really
nice.
great. I felt, like very welcome last night. But we, last night heard a lot about first in the Commonwealth and how Massachusetts leads in so many different areas. And that is true, friends. We live in a state that I am so proud and humbled to be able to live in with so many opportunities, so many great neighbors, so many great things happening, so many firsts, so many areas that we lead on, like the governor said, but where we trail, which shouldn't be ignored and dismissed just because we lead on these other areas so we can just ignore this whole transparency thing. We fall short. We're dead last in transparency and accountability in our legislature. And last night, what concerns me is that the governor of this Commonwealth didn't mention the transparency associated with this ballot question or supporting this, but did praise the Senate President and the Speaker for having what she said was the most productive session. That tells me that we have somewhat of a different opinion on that particular matter, and I am going to ask that we ask the governor to veto any potential changes to this audit law that they might try to sneak through in the middle of the night or in an informal session, and that the Attorney General come out strong. Friends, just like with the MBTA Communities Act, now agree or disagree with the MBTA Communities Act, our Attorney General...
It was just ruled constitutional by the SJC.
Yeah, our Attorney General took a position, stood up for that position, said she's going to sue every city and town who does not comply with the law that she believes in. I would love our Attorney General to believe in this law so much that she stands up and says that she is willing to sue the legislature into compliance should they not follow the law, and then any constitutional decisions, just like what happened with the MBTA Communities Act, that happens in a court of law.
Okay, so since you really hate coming on the show, but you have no choice, can you, for 30 seconds, sing us a little something before you go?
I love coming on the show.
I knew you. No, okay, fine.
Love coming on the show.
What are you going to
especially when
sing?
it's
Quickly.
here.
What are you going to sing?
Oh, we'll sing The Sound of Silence. A little provision.
Fabulous.
Oh, very
I've heard of those
good.
guys.
Okay.
Here she is, Auditor Diana DiZoglio singing Sound of Silence.
Friends said you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you, but my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence.
Diana DiZoglio.
Very apropos.
Eat your heart out, Garfunkel or Simon, whoever
We'd
you
like
were.
a little less silence going
Call your
forward
legislator,
from Beacon
call the
Hill.
governor, auditor. It's great to see you.
Right.
Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everybody.
617-722-2000, by the
Nicely
way,
done,
is the number
Marjorie.
up there at the State House. If you would like to call, you can tell people what city or town you're from, and they'll tell you who your state senator is and who your state rep is in case you don't know. Okay, thank you very much, State Auditor Diana DiZoglio. After a quick break, it's time for our new segment, Two More Things, where Jim and I cover two stories we couldn't quite fit into today's show, that we'll see if we do either of them justice in the time left before one. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, it's only happened once before. Now Donald Trump takes his oath of office on the same Monday as the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We note both events examining the role of inaugural poets and how music has fueled protest movements. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting McLeet, live at Berkeley Performance Center on Saturday, February 1st. McLeet refracts American funk, soul, indie pop, and jazz through traditional Ethiopian styles. Tickets at celebrityseries.org. And Mass Health Connector, dedicated to expanding health insurance access to uninsured and low-income residents with Connector Care. More at mahealthconnector.org or 1-877-MA-ENROLL.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browning, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. As Marjorie said, it's time for our new segment, Two More Things. Marjorie and I bring up something we couldn't fit into the rest of the show, but which does matter to us. What you got, Marjorie?
Well, I shout out to the Quincy Police Department. They have been really great in cracking down on people who steal things off your porch. You know what you call it? You call it porch pirates.
Yeah.
You know, there are all these terrible stories. Beth Teitel had one in the Globe a while back about some poor woman, disabled resident. She lives in fixed income. She gets stuff delivered to her house and she can't get out there in time. And before she gets to get out there at a good time to pick up her packages, you know what they stole from her? They stole a Chewy box filled with kitty litter, Jim. I thought that was terrible. But over in Quincy, they're not taking it. They're not taking it at all. They found in Quincy a food delivery driver delivers the food, and then he steals the packages while he's on the front porch. Then they had a man and woman from Fall River who were arrested. They were rented a U-Haul van to steal packages in this Quincy neighborhood and shove them all in the back of their truck.
Very entrepreneurial,
and
don't
a
you think?
third suspect,
Yeah.
he followed a FedEx truck so that the FedEx truck makes the deliveries and the person runs up and gets them. So this is a very organized stuff. It drives people crazy. It's terrible. Most of the time you get your stuff back. It's not the worst crime in the world, but I love the Quincy Police Department for going after these people. It's really upsetting when you're expecting
It's
all
horrible.
day long your package is going to arrive from Amazon and then they're gone.
You know, every time I go to the mailroom and I worry my sausage of the month will have been purloined
That's right.
by somebody from Fall River.
That's right.
Or
When
some
you're so,
such thing.
I know, it's terrible.
Okay, so I wanted to declare my support for an initiative that has absolutely no chance of becoming law. A local tax on sugary drinks. So it's introduced by City Councilor Sharon Durkin of the Boston City Council. And by the way, I didn't say no chance because of the opposition. The opposition says, you know, people can't afford a new tax. Well, then don't drink a soda, or they should expand it to candy. Don't have candy. The reason is because the legislature will never do anything the people of Boston want. Here's why it's a good idea. What percentage of America is obese, Marjorie? Do you know?
I don't know, Jim.
40%.
Really?
Something like 70% are overweight. It's amazing the country doesn't sink, frankly.
Wow.
40% overweight. You know what one of the primary reasons is? Sugary drinks. So if you want to have them, let's tax them. Deval Patrick tried this statewide, didn't work out. Let's tax them. And you know what the money's going to go to? Public health fund. So it's like a twofer kind of thing. All the research shows if you raise the price by taxing sugary drinks, fewer people, particularly kids, I was a little round mound of sound because I drank Pepsi. No, it's true, nonstop. Little kids in particular will not buy it because they can't afford it. And those who choose to still buy it will essentially be contributing to a public, look at the look on her face, a public health fund, which will actually improve people's lives. 40% obese, a huge reason is sugary drinks. This is a way to cut down on it. It'd be huge.
Jim's a fun kind of guy.
Well, let me
That's all
tell
I
you.
have to say. Let's tax.
What is your opposition to this?
Because I think people should be free to. I mean, if they want to drink Coca-Cola, they
So
shouldn't
we shouldn't
drink
tax
it all the
anything
time.
then. We shouldn't tax meals then either.
I don't think we should do a special tax on Coca-Cola.
I know
Jim.
what you're all thinking. Let's just disregard Marjorie's position, which I am doing. If this gets out of the city council, which I think it will, and becomes a home rule petition, I hope you will call your legislator and say, I support a reasonable tax on sugary drinks. That's
and
it.
If you see a Quincy Cobb, tell him thank you very much for nailing all those people who are stealing things off people's porch. Up next, what is up next? Up next.
LaTosha.
Oh, yes. We're going to talk to LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund, on the continuous battle to protect voting rights as Donald Trump prepares to take office on MLK Jr.
Stainer, and you received a new bank or credit card in the mail recently, there's an easy way to update your information. Just visit gbh.org/update and keep your membership up to date. That's gbh.org/update.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And McLean Middleton. For over 100 years, McLean Middleton has been dedicated to serving its clients and its community, offering guidance through the complexities of today's legal system, with locations in Woburn and Boston. McLean.com. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. A Florida jury has found CNN guilty of defamation. Jurors sided with a security consultant who argued that the news network presented a story that suggested he was charging, quote, exorbitant prices to evacuate people desperate to get out of Afghanistan following the U.S. withdrawal in August 2021. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided to uphold a law banning TikTok unless the ownership changes. And now the White House says it's up to the incoming Trump administration to figure out what to do next. Here's NPR's Deepa Shivaram.
The Biden administration says they believe TikTok should remain available to Americans, but exist under American ownership or different ownership because of national security concerns over the Chinese-owned app.
Date, though it may be delayed a day or so. The first phase of the agreement would bring a halt to the fighting. Hamas would release 33 hostages, and Israel would free around 1,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Meanwhile, Israel is pressing ahead with airstrikes in Gaza. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire agreement was announced Wednesday. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
President Biden's administration has announced the next 15 drugs up for Medicare price negotiation. NPR's Sydney Lepkin says they include diabetes medication that's increasingly being used for weight loss.
The big news is that Ozempic is on this list. Okay. The type 2 diabetes blockbuster is joined by its obesity drug cousin, Wegovy, which has the same active ingredient. It's also joined by drugs for various cancers, asthma, psoriasis, bipolar disorder. To be clear, the government can't pick just any drugs in Medicare. This all comes from Biden's Inflation Reduction Act.
Conducted by a private law firm hired by the university. It included an investigation of events before and during a May 7th protest that ended with a heavy police presence and the arrest of more than 100 people. The issue for UMass Amherst was not students protesting. It was students having structures like fencing set up on the protest site. Chancellor Javier Reyes's concerns, according to the report, were safety and precedence, and it found his decision to disband the protest using police was reasonable. But the report questions if the chancellor could have taken another approach. One thing for sure, a lack of communication between the chancellor and campus and state police was key in tensions escalating. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Jill Kaufman.
In sports, the Celtics host the Magic at the Garden tonight. In the forecast, sunny mid-30s today. We got increasing clouds overnight tonight, low around freezing. Then rain arrives tomorrow with temperatures in the mid-40s. Not too bad, but it looks like maybe some plowable snow, or at least shovel-ready snow on Sunday into Monday. Better gas up that shovel, high in the 30s, and then we're looking at 33 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
Eastern Brownie, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Thank you. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Marjorie. Vice President Kamala Harris was expected by pollsters and pundits to crush the women's vote. We all know now she did not, but she did capture the votes of the vast majority of black women, 92% casting those votes for Harris. Joining us now on Zoom is someone who worked hard to get black voter turnout this election. That's LaTosha Brown. She's the co-founder of the national voting rights group Black Voters Matter that has been the difference maker in a ton of critical elections. In 2021, LaTosha was with me on Greater Boston, and I asked her how she was reflecting on the 56th-year anniversary of voting rights marches in her hometown, which of course is Selma, Alabama, even as several states were rolling back voter protections. I didn't quite expect this response, but here's what she did.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom's land.
LaTosha Brown,
Wow.
great to see you again. Welcome back.
Wow.
Really glad you're here.
That was...
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
that was spectacular. So I'm sure now that it's the middle of January, you're sick of answering this question, but nonetheless, I think people still are wondering, what's your analysis? What did happen? There was so much excitement during the race for Kamala Harris, but it didn't work. Why not?
You know, I think, well, it's interesting because I think I am learning that what was a win and what wasn't a win. And so we kind of deal with absolutes. And the absolute is in terms of, did we get the outcome we wanted? Absolutely not, right? But I do believe that, do I believe that our work was wrong or was, and not, no, I think our work, I think the work that Black women in particular did in coming out doesn't make a difference. I do think that it made a difference. I think it makes a difference in terms of people being engaged. I think it makes a difference of literally leading the trajectory of kind of how we move forward. You know, but what I believe that happened is, in some ways, I'll say for myself personally, I deeply, deeply underestimated how I had hoped that we were at a place in our political reality in this nation that character mattered. And so I deeply, deeply underestimated, you know, how many people were willing to put principle to the side, as I see it, for this idea of the proximity of power. And so, you know, there's one mistake that I think was made is that that's why it's really important not to believe your own hype. Is that I had really believed that America had made it to the point that we were at a place that we had evolved around, on some level, around the issue of race, and that there was some evolution around the issue of gender. And while I don't think that those are the only things or the only elements that mattered in this race, I think that I underestimated kind of the extraordinary barriers that were created based on we're still in a context of a nation that there's a sizable amount of people that do not believe that women can lead in the same way, or hold women at the same standard in which they hold men.
Well, they not only, LaTosha Brown, don't believe that women can do what men in many cases have proven themselves unable to do, but that a man who is a misogynist, who is found liable for sexual abuse by a court of law, and I could go on, I think incredibly accused of similar conduct by at least 24 women, is a perfect person to lead the country your kids are going to grow up in. So how do you explain that one?
I explained that one as I think that we're in a space that there is that character. It's interesting where Dr. King has this quote of saying, judge a country, about the content of their character. I think this country did do that. I think that there is an element of this country that has attached itself to a power that is assigned with dominating others. And I think that we hold that and we value that in such a way. And so I think that ultimately his content did not, the content of his character did not matter. That it doesn't matter if he lies. It does not matter if he is a convicted felon. It does not matter. All of those things, I had to disabuse myself of this idea for years that all of these things that we were trying to lift community up. I spent years working just to get formerly incarcerated people with felony convictions, just the right to vote. Now, and here we have, in the circumstance at the highest level, a man who has been convicted of 30 plus, whatever it is, felony convictions. And I say that to say that the hypocrisy of this nation is showing itself. And I think that I think what went wrong is that we deeply underestimated three things. I think one, I'll say for myself, I underestimated just how deeply entrenched sexism is in this nation, and how it holds men and women at completely two different standards. And then when you say a woman of color, that's a whole different piece itself. The second thing that I think that was really clear for me in this country is that we've allowed ourselves to become political avatars. And in some ways, we really see this as a fight of is me versus you, and not and this paradigm of a win-win. We no longer, I think, see that, and that and I think the part that really broke my heart was this notion and this idea. The biggest part, which I think was a mistake this time, is around messaging matters. That if you have a message, that it doesn't matter whether it's true. If the more sensational you make the message, there are millions of people who would rather follow something that is sensationalized, that actually affirms their worst beliefs about others, than necessarily lean into or even seek the truth or use discernment.
LaTosha Brown, I said at the beginning, I've known you for a bit, and you have been wildly successful in your efforts through the years. You're just acknowledging what you got wrong based upon your retrospective analysis of what you and a lot of people got wrong. How are you changing how you do your work going forward? If it turns out you're right, that the content of one's character doesn't matter, and go down the litany of things you said a minute ago, how do you do what you do differently post November 5th than you did before?
One, I think a couple of things. I know we're hearing a lot of things where we're saying that Black women are resting, and that is true. And I'll tell you why I think that's important. That I have been I'm always busy. And so after this election cycle, I took a much more time than I've ever taken after the election to be contemplative and to be thoughtful. And so it's interesting. There's a book that talks about rest, and it talks about how when you some of the great thinkers, people like Einstein and Oppenheimer and a list of others, would spend 4 to 5 hours a day just in contemplative practice, just walking among the trees, just being, just getting clear. And so it's interesting, as an activist, that sounds kind of counterintuitive, like I'm supposed to be, come on, let's get it, right? But the truth of the matter is, I think that for me, in this moment, I think we have to be more reflective as a movement. I think we have to be more reflective of where we're going, and not reactive. That we have, for me, I believe that I have to be much more reflective, much more decisive, and then unyielding in that direction. I also think that we need to listen more. There were things that we heard on the ground there, and in some ways, we would kind of dismiss, or I would say for myself, I would dismiss some of the smaller grumblings that I heard, or I would just like, certainly there's not an expansion of this. And so what going forward, I want to listen more. I want to be much more reflective. But I also believe, and I'm really serious about this, I say this all the time, I don't think our politics will save us. It will be our humanity. I think that we are allowing ourselves that the values of humanity, we're allowing that to erode. And if we continue to allow that to erode, this idea of who is worthy to be treated like a human being, who is worthy to have power, when we're allowing ourselves to move in a direction that we believe that in order to win, I have to destroy you, that ultimately that will end up being self-destruction for all of us. And so I think in terms of going forward, the way I'm thinking about it, I'm organizing much more. I want to go deeper instead of wider, helping people to really be able to have much more clarity around what it is that we're really fighting for, not just what we're fighting against. The other thing that I want to do, I do want to listen more. I think that there's a shaping, there were millions of people who didn't vote in this election cycle. I think it was somewhere around 80 million people, 80, 85 million people that didn't even participate, right? The goal isn't to change that we're a minority of people are able to dominate their idea of the world for the rest of us. But how do we engage? I'm really deeply thinking about why those 85 million people didn't vote. I want to listen and hear from that, why they did not vote, and really try to engage in work that takes us to the next level. I think that people want to hear something new and different. People want to hear something that's more imaginative. They want to hear something that gives them more hope and makes them feel more power. And so I'm actually in this inquiry of seeking around that, and how do we frame that, and how do we message in a way? Because I do believe that aside from political war, we're in a narrative war. Who has the story? Who tells the story? Actually it gathers the folks. And so I do think it's really important what stories we're telling, how do they impact people, and how will they move us forward? I'm thinking much, much more deeply about that.
We're talking to LaTosha Brown.
There were a lot of problems too with this race. Obviously, Biden getting out so late, Harris having to do a lot in a short amount of time. Also, the fact that I think she had trouble. She didn't want to criticize Biden. She didn't want to differentiate herself that much from Biden on almost anything, and I think that was a hard thing for her. But the thing that always gets me going, obviously I'm a white woman, is what's wrong with white women? I'm being a little sexist to say, but women are usually the moms setting the tone. They spend more time with their kids. We had a woman call up right before the election that was talking about how she's going to vote for Trump, and I did say, what do you say to your children? You got teenage children. The lying, obviously the sex stuff that Jim talked about, but the bullying, that sort of meanness. I mean, what do you say to your children? Black women have been consistently supporting Republicans. As Jim said, I think it was Democrats, excuse me. I think it was like 92%, Jim said before. But white women have voted for Trump in majorities 3 times now, Mm-hmm. And they didn't vote for a woman. They could have voted for a woman, Hillary Clinton. They didn't. So do you ever think about that?
Oh, absolutely. There's 2 parts to that coin. Because on one hand, yes, the majority of white women voted for an agenda that disempowers them, right? And so, that's extremely disappointing. It's not surprising because, like you said, there's a history of that. But I also want to lift up young white women. That 48% of white women voted for us, and they were young. Yeah. And they are the future. And that gives me hope. I'm saying that because that gives me hope, because I think that there's a generation of women, of young white women, who are literally seeing and are saying no. They're saying, no, we're not going to stand to the sidelines. We're not going to fall into the cultural tropes of believing that we've got to hide, or our security is rooted in sexism and rooted in us empowering a man. And so that's the one thing that gives me hope. I think the other thing that specifically, it's Black women sit at this intersection of racism and sexism. And I believe that those are the 2 evils that actually keep holding the potential of this country back. I really believe that if you boil down everything, that those 2 things that are held in some ways, this system is held as truth, literally prevent this country from growing and expanding. And so because of that, in some ways, I believe that experience has forced us to literally, we challenge power in a particular kind of way. And I think we're challenging, because we're uniquely at that intersection, we actually have a deep understanding because of our experience and being marginalized at that intersection. And so we challenge white male power in a particular kind of way. And I think there's examples, I can go on and on and on, examples of that. And so I think that that's part of what I think that drives us to move in a particular kind of way. I also believe part of the disappointment around white women voting in this way is because sexism is not just a belief that men believe, that women also believe deeply in, they have a belief system that is oftentimes rooted in this idea that the ultimate power is maleness. I mean, the fact that, and I'm a person of faith, but I remember my son, when he was 4 or 5 years old, we were riding one day and he asked me, he was just like, God is a man. I was like, no, God isn't a man. We had this whole piece of man. And I was like, no, why do you say God is a man? No, God is a spirit. I was trying to explain this in X, Y, Z. He's like, and he let me go through all that thing. He was like, I know God is a man because he's a he.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, what am I going to do with that, right? Like, and I'm the one teaching him this prayer that says God is a he, right? And so I say that to say that there is a particular kind of, we've got to dismantle these beliefs that in some way, that even as women, we have grabbed and held on to these ideas that men are superior. And as long as we do that, and as long as those are kind of perpetrated as the truth, I think we'll continue to see that. And so there's going to have to be some women who have the courage, have the insight, have the creativity to actually kind of push and lead and push forward and break through that. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of women who also aspire and believe and wear sexism and racism like a cloak of armor.
Talking to LaTosha Brown. So, LaTosha, if there are people listening who either can't do the contemplative thing, I'm one of them, and who are now post-contemplative, meaning they did it and they've emerged, what should they be doing in your, I know listening, I mean, but I don't mean passive in a despair, it's a wrong word. What affirmative things should people be doing who are troubled by the direction our democracy is taking?
Jim, you're going to hate me for this answer.
I can handle it. Go ahead.
I know you're saying you can't be contemplative, but I'm not even saying that deep that you got to walk around the trees. You don't have to walk around. Okay, you don't have to be that deep. Okay, but I do believe that we have to, and I think I've learned this in COVID too. I think that there's nothing wrong with slowing down. That when we make a mistake, let's think about it in our relationships, at our job, when we've made mistakes, if you make a mistake and you just start back and not really think about, just like really sit in it, that 9 times out of 10, you're going to actually make it worse. And so I don't believe that the people on here, many people are not going to like go and talk to the trees or the birds like I do, right? I understand that. Right. But I do believe that it's really important. I'm serious. I think that it is very important for us to get really grounded and reflective as we're moving forward. I think you have to do, you've got to pray and move your feet at the same time. So I think in this moment, there's a couple of things that I think we need to do. I think one, I do think we need to breathe, because part of what fear will make you do is it will make you just respond, and you're responding sometimes in a way that's not strategic. It may not be the message. Sometimes you need to let the smoke clear. I really do believe that.
I know you do.
That sometimes you really have to just let the smoke clear and be really thoughtful so that you can get clarity on the next move. There's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen organizers make is that they're very responsive instead of just taking the time to be reflective so that they can get clarity to move forward. So I think that that's one thing. The second thing I think that we need to do is fortify ourselves. And I'm really serious about that. We think that this is just another election cycle. I am saying this, and I mean this from the depths of my heart. What we are seeing is we're seeing an oligarchy come to power. We are seeing elements of fascism. And I'm not saying that as an alarmist. I am saying this by the textbook definition. If you see of what are some of the things that are happening, we've not been here before. we have to acknowledge we have not been here before. And so it's really important for us to take an assessment around where we are, where we have power, and to fortify ourselves. And what does that mean? Well, that means that, for me, that means that financially, I think this isn't the season for people to be reckless around financial decisions. I also, this is probably the old school in me that comes from my grandparents that were born in 1905 and 1910 that helped raise me, that are now deceased. But my grandfather would always keep money in the house. He would always keep like some money in the house. And part of that is because he lived through the Depression, and they remember where money that they had was lost. And so I'm not trying to be an alarmist and saying that's going to happen. I am just saying that, a couple of days before the election, I don't know if people remember this, but Bank of America went down, and people couldn't get their money out their account. And in addition to that, some people, their account was zeroed out. Now, it was fixed when it came back online, right? But none of us have cash. And so if something happens, I have literally gotten to the point now that I'm going to have $1,000 I can get to, because I never have cash. That seems really small and minutia, but I really believe we gotta think differently. My point is not necessarily go and get $2,000 in cash. My point is we need to think differently in this moment. It's not the same as what we've been faced. We've got to think differently. And I think the third thing is, I think you better I hope you got your seatbelt on. You got to buckle down, because we are in for a ride. We have to be prepared. Are we going to fight for this democracy? And fighting for democracy does not happen because of voting. I'm the first one to tell you that many of the advancements that we've received have not resulted in voting. Voting has been one tool and one lever. We also have levers as consumers in this country, right? That there are companies, that there are people of influence, there are folks that are in office. This is a moment, I really believe, Jim, for us to be reflective. I think it's a moment for us to really think about strategy a little bit differently, and assess where we are to kind of fortify ourselves. And my last thing, this is going to sound Pollyannish, but I really believe this in my heart. I think for us to radically reimagine, we really need to be more imaginative and more of visionaries, and think of ourselves as founders of a new nation, and not just necessarily as citizens of this nation. That means we've got to stretch ourselves and stretch our beliefs around what it is we want to see going forward, and what is needed in order for that to happen.
Wow. LaTosha, I want you to know, because of you, I'm going to talk to a tree on my way home today. LaTosha, it is so wonderful to see you and talk to you again. Don't be a stranger. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much for joining us, LaTosha.
Thank you all for having me.
We have been speaking to LaTosha Brown, co-founder of the national voting rights group Black Voters Matter. Their website, blackvotersmatterfund.org, for more information. That's blackvotersmatterfund.org. Okay, coming up after a quick break. Earlier in the week, Jim did a rant about a TikTok scam involving hard-boiled eggs and a slice of lemon as a way to get the shell off the egg. And I would say we have never been deluged with so many text messages in our life. So we decided to devote the final half hour of a week to all things eggs and egg hacks, and maybe one or two other kitchen hacks. Call or text next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Palisades Fire destroyed more than 2,800 homes and buildings. One of them was the historic ranch house of Will Rogers, the vaudeville entertainer and trick roper.
There were some key things owned by Will, like his boots, his typewriter. There was, gifts that were really rare gifts made to the family.
We take stock of what's left on All Things Considered.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting McLeet, live at Berkeley Performance Center on Saturday, February 1st. McLeet refracts American funk, soul, indie pop, and jazz through traditional Ethiopian styles. Tickets at celebrityseries.org. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, You can advance your career with 2 to 3 day courses designed for professionals. Topics include leadership, innovation, and strategic management. Learn more at executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You may remember, as Marjorie said earlier this week, during the new Two Things segment. We do, whatever it's called. I aired a grievance about this full-on, it's a scam perpetrated on TikTok about how you can put a slice of lemon in the water when you're hard-boiling eggs to make it easier to peel the shell. Well, supposedly it had something to do with the citric acid and lemon softening the eggshell. Turns out, at least for me, it was a complete fiction. But while that didn't work, a lot of you, and I want to repeat, a lot of you listening out there, had a lot of thoughts about the best methods for peeling a hard-boiled egg. You sent us hundreds of texts, some of which we will read in the next few minutes. But we thought we'd end the week taking your calls or texts, more texts, on this troubling problem heartbreaking problem, I'd say, we've all dealt with. What is the best method for getting the shell to gracefully slide off the egg? And does any of this have you reconsidering your relationship with the often overlooked hard-boiled egg? The number is 877-301-8097. We also decided as a public service to broaden it. If you want to talk about other food hacks, sort of unorthodox approaches to the kitchen that actually work, how susceptible you are to this kind of kitchen brain thing. How do you cut onions so you don't cry, for example? I actually do have a solution to that.
You do?
I do, yeah, and it does work. I'll tell you in a minute. How do you peel garlic without losing your mind? 877-301-8097. Your egg peeling and other kitchen hack tricks here at 877-301-8970. Do you think you know how to peel an egg, hard-boiled egg, easily?
I told you.
No, ice bath doesn't work.
No, it's not just that. You had to put them in I don't put them in ice bath, cold water, and then I roll them up and down the counter.
Oh, you did say roll.
Until there's a million cracks in them, and then the membrane comes off quite easily, Jim. I know that because of my glorious history making deviled eggs.
Oh, yeah, you're an excellent
which everyone thinks are terrible.
They're
but
terrible.
I make them anyway. A little Cane's mayonnaise, I like them. But we have all sorts of ideas from people. Listen to this. Jim, just add a little baking soda to the water and don't let it boil over. Baking soda is huge. This person claims, Valerie from Kittery, that her shells come off in just 3 pieces. And somebody else, Margot in Newburyport, says baking soda. People have elaborate methods. This is from Kenji, who says, longtime Boston chef, by the way, cracked the code in this dilemma years ago. Put eggs in a steamer.
It's not from Kenji, by the way. It's from somebody else talking about Kenji's
That's right.
method.
It's from Erin and JP talking about Kenji's method. Okay. You put eggs in a steamer basket, steam for 12 minutes, put them in an ice bath to cool, tap all the way around the egg, and peel under a small stream of water. And then somebody else...
Wait, you didn't read the end of that thing. It says after you put it under a tall stream of water, turn around to the right 3 times, and then circle around to the left 2 times, sit down, stand up, and then peel the egg. By the way, I want you to know, I've tried everything. I have tried the ice bath thing.
Vinegar and salt?
No, I have not.
Have you tried putting a pin in the end of the egg?
No.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I'll do that
next. Put a pin in the end of the egg.
I've tried the rolling thing that you talk about.
Yep.
I put it in an ice bath the second I'm done cooking them, and then I peel them quickly after the ice bath, which theoretically is a solution to it. Doesn't work for me. What works for you? 877-301-8097. As I said, any trick you've got, whether it's the onion peeling thing, which is a real big problem for a lot of people, or garlic, or whatever it is that drives you nuts in the kitchen, here is an opportunity for us to solve some of those problems. Here's another text before, and by the way, we're going to take people in the audience if you want. Over there is our colleague, Nicole, and if you go to Nicole and say you're dying to weigh in and you really have a solution as opposed to BS, we'll let you talk and maybe help all of us out. Listen to this person. I can feel your frustration through the radio. I'm the executive chef at the Amica Mutual Pavilion and the team chef for the Providence Bruins down here in Providence. I listen to you and Marjorie daily, thank you. Gorgeous egg, easy peel, boiled eggs, do this. Put eggs in cold water in a pot, I do that. Cover and bring to a boil, do that too. As soon as they boil, you have to watch for this, turn the heat off, I do that too, and leave them on the stove covered for 10 minutes, which is what I do, chef. After 10 minutes, immediately drain and submerge them in ice water. After 3 or 4 minutes, you should be able to peel them very easily. So that's what this chef says, that's what the chef says. 877-301-8970. You want to know how to do an onion without crying?
Put a wet paper towel next to it.
What?
Put a wet paper towel next to it.
What the hell's that got to do with it?
That's one of the suggestions. On
Put a
how
wet paper towel next to it?
It's supposed to absorb.
What is that supposed to do?
Absorb the stuff that makes you get teary-eyed.
It is?
Yeah, that's what this story. It says
Well, I never heard of
CNN,
that.
Jim, your favorite station.
Well, it was anyway. So what do you want to know what works for me, or you don't care?
Tell me.
Now, by the way, a lot of these articles, she doesn't care, I can tell.
I do.
A lot of these articles say you should wear goggles. How ridiculous do you look in the kitchen chopping on the cutting bar wearing goggles?
I've worn glasses.
You know what you do?
Glasses helps.
Okay, fine. So you get a little tiny fan. You put a little tiny fan to the right or left of you, and when you put the egg down or the onion down, you start slicing it. You turn the fan on, and it blows whatever that crap is that comes out of the onion to make you your eyes tear. What do you think of that?
You saw that on CNN.
No, I actually done it.
That's the first suggestion on CNN. Is,
well, there you go. They're right on that one.
A fan. They also mentioned the goggles as well. I'm looking for the
goggles are ridiculous.
I'm looking for the paper towel thing.
Okay, fine. Let's go to Frank in Weston. You are first on Boston Public Radio. This is a problem-solving half hour here on Boston Public Radio. Help us solve problems, Frank. Welcome.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. I've called many times before.
You have?
Okay. I was.
Yeah.
Do you remember the bikini that we had, the ball back thing?
The bikini? You and I were wearing a bikini?
Yeah, you remember.
Oh, now I do. That was a great time, Frank. I haven't seen you in ages. I don't remember that. How about peeling an egg?
How you peel an egg?
Yeah.
Put it in an Instapot. It cooks instantly, and it skills in no time. The best.
Okay, well, some of the people who texted in said the Instapot is the way to go. I remember those bikini times like it was yesterday, Frank. Thanks for the call.
What's an Instapot?
You don't know what an Instapot?
No, I don't.
You don't know do you know what an air fryer is?
I know what an air fryer is.
You don't know what an Instapot is?
I don't. I don't cook much, Jim, as you know.
Oh, my God.
I'm not really much of a cook.
Anonymous texter says, I let my husband peel the eggs. Otherwise, it would be a total mess for me.
That's
Do we
a
have
good
somebody
idea.
at the mic here, actually, who purports to be a chef? Where is this person? This person says that they are a personal chef. Is that true? Bill at the mic?
Yes, Jim, it is true. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, how are you?
Bill.
Do you have a solution for this?
Yes, I do.
You have to read it?
No, I have the notes.
Okay, go ahead.
I've actually answered all the questions you've been raising. But
Please.
For the eggs, actually, in your case, Jim, it might be operator error, but the basic methods are the same. Bring them to a boil, cover, let it sit.
Turn it off.
Ice it, and peel quickly. Don't let them sit. Now, it could be the age of the eggs, and often your mileage may vary. Sometimes the eggs go perfectly, sometimes it doesn't, but just be patient because you know how sometimes you go to peel off a big hunk and half the egg goes with it?
Yeah.
It's already cracked. Put it back in the ice water because I keep the pan filled with the water and I dip it in to get the little bits as you're peeling it. So just be patient with it. But what I do is when I pour the boiling water out before I put the ice water in, I roll the eggs around in the pan. They crack, and that lets. And then when you put the ice water in, that lets some water get between the shell and the egg.
You listen to this?
I am listening.
How authoritative is this guy sound?
Well, you can tell that he's an expert.
What's the onion
chef.
deal with you? Before you go ahead,
yes.
Someone called the other. Did they call? No, they texted the other day and said the key, and I think you referenced it's an old egg.
Yes.
But then someone texted and said when they're talking about older eggs, what I think they mean. This is the texter. I think they mean older hens. And if that's true, how the hell do you know how old the hen is? No way. Put the mic back up.
You've got no way of knowing. But part of the problem, too, is when you buy them in the supermarket, they've got an expiration date. But how old are the eggs?
Exactly.
And so that's kind of a coin toss.
How about the onion thing, since you're here?
Contact lenses.
What?
You need to wear contact lenses.
What if you don't wear contact lenses?
Go out and make the investment.
Okay, thank you. Chef Bill, thank you. You were excellent. I'm really glad you came today. Thank you. Chef Bill, personal chef.
Thank you very much.
Sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
He does know what he's talking about. Aiden says
You don't know.
blindfold for cutting an onion is the best he's found.
Yeah, well, how do you see the whatever?
You have no fingers left. You cut
By the way,
thumb right
here's
off.
what happened. Marjorie mentioned putting the wet paper towel next to the onion, and of course this happens every time. An anonymous texter says, I'd like to shove a wet paper towel in your mouth, Jim.
That would work, actually. That would achieve the desired end.
Here's one. This is also in the CNN story. In addition to the small fan for chopping the onion, light a candle next to the onions. The flame will extinguish the odor.
You know what the argument is, by the way? You want to hear something really interesting? I don't know if this is crap, too. The argument, this may have been in the CNN piece, I'm not sure, about why an onion makes you cry. It's the natural behavior, is that the right word when you're talking about an onion? To have you not eat it. And so it emanates this tear jerk.
You mean it's defense mechanism?
That's what I was trying to say. It's defense mechanism. What do you think of that?
Well, you're right. It's really the plant's defense mechanism, and it comes from its cell structure, which has different compartments to separate substances that could have a reaction. And when you damage those cells with a knife, an enzyme and amino acid are combined to form sulfur compounds, sending vapors into the air to your eyes.
It's incredible. Ben texts, bad news for Marjorie. They discuss egg peeling in depth on Joe Rogan. Does anybody listen to Joe Rogan? Is that true? Is it true? No, I'm not a huge Joe Rogan audience. Okay, fine.
Okay.
877-301-8970. Again, we're trying to solve, and I think Chef Bill helped, and some of these texts are helping. The onion peeling dilemma. And other dilemmas that what are other dilemmas that people have in the kitchen other than onions? You know what the solution, by the way, to the peeling the garlic? Don't peel the garlic.
Don't peel the garlic.
You go to Market Basket, you get like 40 heads or 60 heads of garlic peeled. Whole, not crushed like they are, because they get crummy after time, in a little plastic container, and you use them.
There you go, Jim. That's how you get salmonella.
What Zoe said, you get salmonella? Why do you get salmonella? Chef Bill, just nod. She says, our coworker says, cut vegetables in the supermarket can give you salmonella. Is that right? More likely than if you do them fresh yourself. Well, Chef Bill agreed with you, Zoe.
There you go.
That's the end of that.
No more cut vegetables.
Okay.
Out the window.
Where do you want to go?
Does a Instapot use a dustbuster charger?
Well, you have to listen to the show to know what the point of that is.
That's because I couldn't use my dustbuster because I lost the charger.
Right, and I gave her a charger for Christmas, which I thought was brilliant. And what did she do? She bought a new dustbuster that came with a charger.
I love my dustbuster.
That's great.
Now I have two chargers.
You have two chargers.
It's very exciting.
It's
a way to go.
Cost me $19.99, by the way.
Carol from New Hampshire, thank you for calling.
Hey, Carol.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
I'll give you these. I have tips for both garlic and eggs.
Oh, please.
After you cook your eggs, everyone knows how to cook a hard-boiled egg.
We do.
Put them in ice cold water.
Yeah, we do.
And after they've had a chance to cool down, I have paper towels on my countertop, and I put a couple, Anyway, what I do is I take the egg and I roll it gently.
So Marjorie does.
And it cracks the whole shell.
That's right.
And then I run that cracked egg under running water, tepid water, for my own comfort. You can do cold water, whatever temperature you want. But the little broken shells come off very easily.
They do.
Then I lay that shelled egg onto the other paper towel and let it dry off. So then I just do that. Now for garlic, I take the head and I whack it.
Whack it.
And then I break off all those little garlics. Stick them in a small Ziploc bag.
Oh.
And then I take a wooden spoon and I beat them. Bang, 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 bang.
Yeah, you get off on that, don't you, obviously? Go ahead.
Skin.
I mean, she does.
And then when I take them out, the skins pop off easily.
That is.
There you go.
You are another
and I love
amazing
your
listener.
enthusiasm, the way you said you whacked it, Carol.
Yeah.
You whacked it.
But you didn't do what Carol does.
Gusto.
You're going to be late for work. I mean, there's so many steps to that. Carol, that was excellent.
Okay.
That was excellent, though.
Sheila from North Attleboro
What did she
says,
say?
what you must do is keep your mouth closed while cutting onions, which explains Jim's problem.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh, I love
James
that
from
one.
the car says, when cutting an onion, just wrap your head with plastic wrap. Which
Listen to this one. This sounds crazy.
That's fairly funny.
Brendan from Norfolk says, put 2 matchsticks in your mouth as you're cutting the onion and you won't cry. Okay, try that one, Jim.
Okay,
he
good.
says it works.
Okay, so these are really helpful. 877-301-89. What's the number here? 70. Let's go to Newburyport.
Hi,
where
George.
George is on the thing there. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, guys. So I have a quick one, actually, for the onion.
Okay.
Please.
And what you want to do is when you're cutting the onion, you try not to have your face over the onion.
Right.
So if you just kind of step back a little bit, you got that onion about 1.5 feet in front of your head.
Sure.
Your eyes, your nose, the place that gets teary. And I never cry when I'm cutting an onion unless I forget. And I'm like, my head is right over the onion.
Sure.
And the stuff is going right into my face.
What about, do you have any friends who have short arms, George, or not?
What
do they do?
That's the thing. But you know what? You could actually, I don't know, maybe sit down or kneel.
I got it.
I've done that, though.
Okay, you have another. You have an egg thing too, right?
Yeah.
That was excellent. Well, how about the egg thing or whatever it
I
is?
do not have an egg thing. I have a different one.
Whatever.
It's fast whipped cream.
What's
so
that?
You don't have to make a mess. You don't have to use the electric mixer. You just take your heavy cream and pour some into a little Tupperware.
Yeah.
Sprinkle a little sugar in there. You got to make sure it's a tight seal on the Tupperware before you do this.
Yeah.
But you're just going to shake it like you would shake a cocktail shaker.
Yeah.
In about 2 minutes, you're going to have awesome whipped cream.
Oh.
This is a great one for, if you're making a dessert on a holiday and you forgot, oh, crap, we got to serve this in 5 minutes. How are we going to make whipped cream?
By the way, it's one of Marjorie's favorite foods in the whole world.
I love whipped
homemade
cream.
whipped cream.
But that's a very useful one for me, George. I never
Did you
heard
write that down or what?
Yeah, no, I didn't, but I heard it. Hey,
George, those
that's
are excellent.
Thank you very
How
much,
about
George.
Lance? You want to read Lance has a brilliant
and Lynn.
idea.
I was told to slice my onions under running water, so I cut my onions in the shower.
Exactly. Another excellent hack, I should say.
Another texter, they must be referring back to our toxic masculinity, or this is the year of the alpha male. I think anyone who wants to stop crying while cutting onions has a masculinity problem.
Exactly. Let's go to Susan in the car. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Hi.
I have an infallible method for, let me turn my radio off.
Please.
I have an infallible method for cutting onions without tearing up.
What is it?
We're ready.
Which is just fill your mouth with cold water, and then don't open your mouth while you're cutting the onion.
Wait, is that real, or are you?
Yes.
Playing
no, I'm
with
not
us.
making it up. I learned this in Brazil many years ago from a former mother-in-law who was a great Italian cook, and it works.
By the way, while you're talking about whatever you said, putting a mouthful of water, closing your mouth, and doing whatever, Janet texted. Cold water, sorry. While cutting the onions, I have a piece of bread in my mouth, pressed to the roof of my mouth, no tears. What do you think about that one, Susan? You ever heard of that?
I haven't heard of that, but the idea of closing your mouth,
Yeah.
kind of, and not breathing, you're not breathing in the fumes of whatever makes
That
you
becomes
cry.
a problem after a while, though. Would you agree? It's a big onion. You're dead as a doornail.
If you're not a cook like me and you're cutting a single onion, it's
God,
fine.
that's a good point.
So
Okay,
here's
Susan,
where
thank
we
you.
are
That was really good.
at this point in this discussion. You're about 1.5 feet away from the onion with
Yeah.
your head wrapped in plastic wrap,
right.
contact lenses, and goggles over contact
I like
lenses,
that.
and you have bread in your
Good.
mouth and you're not breathing.
Can we go? I'm sorry, I know this. I usually don't do this because you guys do it, but Deb in Lexington has a suggestion that is many of our texters propose. So can we go to her and she can tell it, because we have failed to say what a lot of people think is the best way. Deb, what's your fix on the egg front?
Yeah, hello. So I have to say that I was struggling with eggs like so many folks.
Sounds like it,
and
yeah.
I
Dog eat dog.
found
Yeah.
the perfect remedy,
What's
which
that?
is that you put a steamer basket in your pot
Yeah.
and fill it with water to the steam level and put your eggs in.
Yeah.
And then you steam for about 13 minutes, turn the heat off, shock the eggs, let them cool a little bit, and they peel perfectly.
Can I tell you something, Deb? I'm so glad you called. Thank you for that excellent call. A lot of people they're not laughing at you, they're laughing at some idiotic thing. Okay. A lot of people are talking about steaming. I'm going to try that. Deb, thank you for the recommendation. What's the text?
Well, a couple of texts. Apparently, Joan in Jamaica Plain says there's something called a Swedish egg peeler. You can get one of those, I guess, on Amazon, Jim.
Okay.
The Jonas Swedish egg peeler.
Pronounce the second word. Go ahead.
I'm not going to try to
Jonas
pronounce it.
Agskalain.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Agskalain.
Okay. Mitch in New Bedford.
Wait, you didn't say what it does. Say what she
The
said.
blade
does.
cracks the shell around the middle. The spoon is the right curve to scoop the egg out cleanly.
How great would that feel?
And Mitch, he's got the most practical one of all, considering your tire.
So
That what you do, Jim, is you pull a dickie, your dickie over your face
Oh my God!
while you cut the onion,
That is so
and you will be fine.
You see me laugh? I am like.
Jim doesn't want to admit it, but he's got a closet full of dickies.
I'll admit it. I have no problem admitting
And
it.
when he's home alone, he dons a dickie, and it makes him feel good. We don't
Nothing
understand
else,
it.
right, Marjorie? That really gets you excited there.
Well.
Okay. To each his own. Gretchen in Bedford, we're solving problems here, which we never do on the show. So I feel pretty good about it. Gretchen in Bedford, where are you? Bedford, hi.
Hi, yeah, Bedford, Massachusetts.
We know where it is. Yep, great.
Oh, okay. So I have the most fun way to do this.
Oh.
I saw a video.
Yeah.
Once the eggs are cooled, because you do have to cool them,
Okay.
you put it in a jar with about an inch of water at the most. You cover the jar and you shake it vigorously, and the shell just comes off.
Oh.
That's it.
That's it. That sounds like a
Wait,
good
how
one.
much water do you put in the jar again?
Like no more than an inch.
Oh, and you shake it around. Well, I like that.
It just comes all off, and then I take the egg out and just dry it off.
How'd you come up with that? Did you figure that out yourself, or how'd you come up with it?
No, I wish I had. No, I saw a video.
Oh, you said that, yeah. Well, I'm going to try it tonight, Gretchen. Thank you for an excellent suggestion.
Ken in Arlington makes a great point.
What do you say?
You don't have to worry about your dickie, Jim, or wrapping
not
your
worried
head
about
in
my
plastic
dickie.
wrap or contact lenses or goggles. You just get your COVID face mask, and you wear it when you're cutting the onions. Wouldn't
By the way,
work well?
that seems to because it covers
Yeah.
your nose and your mouth.
Yeah, I remember one of the things when it's really cold, like it has been lately, and you're
Yeah.
like a walker or a runner. COVID masks are great for protecting your face too, because you don't sweat too much, and they keep your nose and the bottom of your face from being too cold. And we've all got how many COVID masks do you have at home? I probably
Thousands.
got about exactly
Thousands.
this whole stash ready for the next pandemic. Justin in the car, thank you for calling.
Hi, Justin.
Yeah, hi guys. Long-time listener, long-time caller.
Thank you.
Hey, the best thing you could do with onions, and it sounds too simple to be true.
Yeah.
Your knife needs to be really sharp.
Huh.
Yeah. And that's it?
Well, that makes sense.
You break less of the cell walls of the onion, and also don't cut through the root, because that's where a lot of the sulfur starts to leak out, and that's where you run into crime.
What is the roof of an onion?
Root.
Oh, root. I'm sorry. Okay.
It's the little hairy part.
Oh, God. Okay. I mean, I have sharp knives, and okay. Thank you, Justin, very much for that call. We
I think
appreciate
I have a
it.
lot of trouble with peeling onions. Next time we
You
could
do?
do a show about that. Yeah, the best way to peel the onions.
We might
There's
do
all
a
these
3-hour
tricks.
show on that because, it's clear people are more interested in this than Trump's inauguration. Can you believe he's gone inside, by the way? Mr. Tough Guy. And by the way, what happens to
The alpha males.
200,000 people that are allegedly coming to this thing? They can't fit in the rotunda.
I don't know.
At the Capitol. Where do they go?
I guess they're outside watching nothing. I mean, that's the thing. It's right there in front of the White House. You can see it way, way, way back, but that won't be happening. I think it had to do with the hair, actually. He
Hair
was an
blowing
interloper.
thing?
Well, the hair. What's he going to do? Make America
No,
great?
wear a red hat.
I don't think
red
he could
hat.
do that
Why can't you?
inauguration. I just don't think that looks good. I don't think he wanted to wear earmuffs, so I couldn't wear a COVID mask because that would admit that.
But
COVID
what better
masks
way
work.
to show how tough you are? You ever watch a football game when it's like -5 degrees and almost all the football players have arms and gloves and whatever, and there's some big lineman who comes out who weighs like 370 pounds with bare
Nothing,
arms
yep.
and nothing and that sort of thing?
I was lucky enough to go to Barack Obama's first inaugural, and it was so cold that the ink in my pen froze. We all had to use pencils.
Who are you standing
and our
right next
computers-
to, Marjorie?
All these superstars.
Explain who you're
I said,
standing
for the
next-
first time in my life, we always had the bad seats when I was at the Herald. We'd always been in the roof somewhere. We're out behind the garage. For some reason, I wound up next to all of these black superstars. I was
Like?
next to Oprah. I was next to Denzel Washington. I was next to Beyonce. We were all right there. I had the front row seats. It was such a thrill. I said hello to everybody very casually, like it was no big deal for me to be there with all these superstars. But it was freezing, and I think they were outside. And what's wrong with Mr. Alpha Male, huh?
Tell people when Oprah turned to you and said, "Love your show." Do you remember when she said
did.
it to you?
Oprah, thank you.
We only have 30 seconds. For
Appreciate it.
Ed in the car, very quickly. Ed, do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a thing for peeling garlic.
What is it?
It's you take the garlic clove
Yeah.
and then break all the individual cloves off.
I love that part.
Put them in a Put them in a small metal bowl.
Yeah. Then what? And give them to
Then
somebody
have
else.
What? No. Then there's you have a second metal bowl you put over the top of it, and you shake all the cloves around inside the bowl really hard.
Oh, okay.
And the skin peels right off.
Oh, I love that. Ed, thank you. It's an excellent way to end the conversation. Now, we always guess about Jared. I would bet Jared has never sliced an onion in his whole life. The issue is not...
He's quite the cook.
No, you've never sliced. You've never sliced an onion?
Never sliced it. I've diced an onion.
Oh, excuse me. So you really... Are you a
Get
cook?
one of those
You're a good
Vegematics.
cook?
I have first of all, somebody gave me one of those egg peeler things once,
Yeah.
those
I didn't know there were-
machines
oh,
that
yeah?
you buy on TV, and I
Yeah.
used it, you press it down, and then it splatters all over your kitchen.
that, yeah.
I used it once, and it went into the
Oh, that's
trash.
very sad.
Horrible thing. But no, you have to, the eggs have to be like at least a week old. That's all that you need to do.
You mean
Wait,
past
the
the...
egg is old and it's easier to peel?
Hold on. You mean past the expiration date?
No, only a week.
Oh, a week old.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Listen, it's
they go past their
casual
expiration.
response like anybody knows.
Well,
you
it's
buy
just-
a week-old egg.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
How about onions? What do you do for that? Wear goggles?
Yeah, I don't need goggles.
'Cause you're
I can
tough.
wear a Speedo in 0-degree weather.
I bet you would. Okay, enough of that. What are you, more than enough of that, actually.
Did I embarrass you, Jim?
Well, a little bit. What are you
Did you ever
doing?
do the thing, January, over there?
What?
Oh, no, the polar dive?
Yeah,
No.
the polar dive. Yeah, with L Street brownies. Okay, what are you
We
doing?
had a friend, we had a colleague who did
Hank Morris.
Hank Morris would do
yeah,
it
he did.
every
Yeah, every year,
January
run
1st.
into the water.
Great Hank
Very
Morris.
exhilarating.
I did go
What a
into the water in
sweetheart.
Iceland, though.
You did?
Which is pretty cold, yeah.
That's impressive.
Do you know what Diana DeZoglio does every single morning? At her house, the auditor was just here. She has one of those dive things
cold
on her
plunge?
back porch, the cold thing. Doesn't she sit in there like 10 minutes or something?
Hey, she got to do something to put up with this legislature.
Okay, sorry, Jared. What are you doing again?
Well, we know, of course, what the Supreme Court said about TikTok, so
Yeah,
we'll be
we
talking
do.
about that and what it means if it all shuts down after Sunday. Also staying with the Supreme Court, they weighed into the issue of porn and freedom of speech this week, so we'll look at that.
I heard what Alito. You're going to mention what Alito.
Yes,
okay, I won't blow
in fact,
up,
we
guys.
will hear from him, actually,
I love
as
that.
he says that. And then everything from Bad Bunny to the Pope releasing his memoir, which was supposed
He
to be
did?
posthumous. Instead, he decided to release it in this Jubilee year.
Wow, that's incredible.
Sheila is watching on YouTube, and she wants to know if we can skip the inauguration, just spend the whole show on Monday talking about helpful tips on peeling your eggs.
What we just made. Tune in Monday. That's it.
Okay.
Jared, coming up in 2 minutes and 40 seconds right here at the Boston Public Library live.
Yes, thank you very much for people who tuned in to Boston Public Radio
And thank you
today.
for
Thanks
coming,
to people,
everybody. We really
that
appreciate
came down
it.
to the library. Very much appreciate that. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our great TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Who knows if it's going to be there next week, Jim, but we'll see. On Monday, we're going to be live on the air streaming special Boston Public Radio coverage of President Trump's inauguration, as well as Martin Luther King Day. We'll also be taking your calls with additional commentary from GBH News analyst Charlie Sennett, the NAACP's Michael Curry, and Mass GOP Chair Amy Carnevale about the inauguration.
Who I think is going to be at the inauguration, calling in from the inauguration.
Yep. She's head of the Republican Party in Massachusetts. Our crew: Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, John LaClaw Parker, Jamie Bologna, our executive producer, BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Bill Francis, Juan Jose Cadena, Olivia Corsillo. Thanks to our hosts, as well as the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned to the Culture Show's Week in Review, which starts right after us here. No news on 89.7 GBH. They are broadcasting like
Continuing all afternoon on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up today on our Arts and Culture Week in Review, after 19 states passed laws requiring age verification to access porn sites, the Supreme Court will decide if these laws are constitutional. From there, we remember the innovative and industrious filmmaker, artist, and composer David Lynch. His works are absurd, disturbing, grotesquely beautiful, and often darkly funny. He brought us into deranged universes and underworlds, carving out a place for independent filmmakers along the way. And California is still ablaze, leaving a number of architectural landmarks in ashes. The fires have also disrupted award season as organizations decide how to include a focus on first responders, recovery, and healing. Bad Bunny returns to his roots with a concert residency in Puerto Rico, and Pope Francis can now add memoirist to his LinkedIn profile. His autobiography, Hope, was released this week, making him the first pontiff to publish his memoirs since the 15th century. All that and more now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is
probably going to lose my 3 cents per video.
Two other Chinese social media apps, RedNote and Lemonade, have rocketed to the top of the charts, seeing a surge in so-called TikTok refugees.
American filmmaker David Lynch has died, according to a family statement. The 78-year-old is best known for directing avant-garde films like Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive, as well as the TV show Twin Peaks.
Landing in LA, the view from the plane was ominous. Smoke from the Palisades fire melding with the clouds, nearly blocking out the sun. Fire threatening the landmarks many Americans have come to know from TV and in movies.
Now, Hack star Jean Smart made a public plea for TV networks to reconsider airing award shows amid all the devastation. She says they should donate the revenue that they would have garnered to the victims of the fires and the firefighters.
I feel like I've been talking about Bad Bunny all this week. He made history by announcing his first ever residency in Puerto Rico, a move no other artist has ever done on the island.
The autobiography Hope was to be published after Pope Francis's death. But with the Jubilee year, it comes out today. The reality is quite simply that I am old, the 88-year-old writes.
Well, as you just heard, after the Supreme Court ruled to uphold the TikTok ban, the platform and its users are preparing for the popular app to go dark in the U.S. From there, the singular filmmaker David Lynch, known for his neo-noir mysteries and surreal, sinister take on the American way of life, has died at age 78. And wildfires continue to ravage California, reducing architectural landmarks to ashes. The inferno is also interrupting the award season, with nominations postponed, and Hollywood weighing how to shine the spotlight beyond the celebrities and onto first responders and recovery efforts. Then it's one small step for man, one giant step for the moon. Earth's moon has been selected as a historical preservation site when TikTok has signaled it will turn off its app for U.S. users, leaving the platform's future in the hands of the incoming Trump administration. Obviously, there has been a lot of wrangling that's been happening up on Capitol Hill. We're learning that TikTok has had lobbyists up there meeting with everyone. We know that Chuck Schumer has met with the president because he didn't want this to end on Biden's watch. We have indications from incoming President Trump that he will extend this. But the reality is, unless it's sold, the law holds that it is supposed to be illegal to use TikTok in this country. This would come by way of Apple and other platforms for this. The Supreme Court ruled that they thought that because of foreign adversary control, because of sensitive data collection, this is not a free speech issue. Just a little while ago, TikTok's CEO, Shou Chew, in a video, released his response to the Supreme Court's decision.
TikTok is a place where people can create communities, discover new interests, and express themselves, including over 7 million American businesses who earn a living and gain new customers using our platform. We are grateful and pleased to have the support of a president who truly understands our platform, one who has used TikTok to express his own thoughts and perspectives, connecting with the world and generating more than 60 billion views of his content in the process.
So we don't know if that was a plea or that was a method of control, but 170 million users are waiting to find out.
Well, he'll be the president of ByteDance, which owns TikTok, will be at the inauguration on Monday. That's the day after the ban goes into place. Biden has said he's not going to do anything, so he's just going to leave it for President Trump to do as he will. President Trump has hinted he might write an executive order, but I think it's confusing. I'm not certain that can be effective since this is a law passed by Congress and there's a lot of other things. Usually you can, when you put those executive orders in, you try to work around the law in some way. You can't sort of directly attack the law, if you know what I'm saying. So what happens? Immediately, we're told that it'll just sort of fade, and then it's gone. And lots of people have already jumped to another Chinese-owned app called Little Red Note, which I will note features the writings and the sayings of Chairman Mao. So if there was ever any question that this was connected to the Chinese government, there you have it. And one last thing I'll say is that Christopher Wray, on his way out as Biden's FBI director, has said emphatically, this is a security risk, period.
I mean, you know, there's a few things that stand out to me about this. First of all, the Supreme Court ruled today, and there was no dissent in that ruling, which is increasingly something we don't see. And also, the lower court judges that ruled on this in the lead up to this have also essentially universally said this is okay. So there is not a judge in this country who has said that they have a problem with this law. It is pretty clear that the judges in this country, that it is okay to ban this, that banning this under the premise that it is being banned under, and I think this is important too, because I think the justices have gone out of their way in this ruling to say, listen, this one has nothing to do with the actual content on TikTok. The content on TikTok is not skewing in any particular direction politically or the kind of content that it is. They make it clear that the rationale is a rationale about national security because of the concerns of the fact that the Chinese government could potentially have access to a lot of user information. And so I think it is important to remember, at least on the face of this, that the conversation around this is at least legally a national security conversation and not about content. I think a lot of stuff going on in social media really is about the content. This one, not.
I just want to point out, Red Note is named after the founder's alma mater, Stanford, and his first job at Payne Company, our team is telling us. But so here's where I look at this. This is like every deadline, right? You come down to the deadline and suddenly everyone is exploding and everyone is reacting in the same way when we have known that this was going to happen for quite some time. I agree that from everybody I've talked to over the years in interviews or what we've been told, the reporting suggests that this is a national security issue. Whether it's John Brennan, the former CIA director, or I was speaking with Oren Etzioni, an AI pioneer, who told me this week that he doesn't allow his children to use TikTok because it's so concerning for his family. So I don't use TikTok personally, so I feel like I'm looking at this from the outside, and I recognize that we have 170 million users. I recognize, as we've talked about on this show, there's an entire economy that is built around TikTok. People have created businesses. It has made this country more democratic because you're able to just launch into this without having to climb some hierarchy in order to do this. But at the same time, and we're leaving influencers outside of this because this is sort of the Etsy crowd, this is restaurants who've become very popular using TikTok. But at the same time, it's almost akin to building on a coastline, that you know that this business model could very well erode at some time, which it has. Because, Callie, to your point, if Donald Trump, as president, issues an executive order, it doesn't negate the law. What he can do is basically kick the can down the road, but this is precarious. I think as a species, as business people, we're used to adjusting. We can adapt to the good, we can adapt to the bad. And it looks to me from the outside as this is a moment we have to move on. And already, as you pointed out, Callie, we're finding other platforms.
Well, I will say a couple of things. First of all, there are Americans, part of the avoiding banning was that you could sell it to a U.S. entity.
Which they still can if they do.
Well, I'm just saying. So I just wanted to mention that there were Americans who had put forth bids.
Sure.
One of them was Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, and I think Elon Musk has a bid in, so there are bids to buy it. I'm not actually certain how that makes it less problematic with regard to security, but be that as it may, that was the rule.
And also TikTok saying they don't even want to sell necessarily.
Right, so that's the point, that they wouldn't sell. So there you have it, even facing a potential ban. But I think we have to talk about how ingrained. I have not downloaded TikTok, but I have friends who send me stuff all the time, and I watch it, and it has the ability to capture moments, cultural moments that are incredible. I'm thinking about when Beyonce's Cowboy Carter came out. There was like 5 billion.
You're touching on something I think very important here, and you know, there's a lot of discussion out in the world about this. I certainly encourage people to look into this more. But there are other video sharing websites, right? There are other apps out there where you can share videos. One of the things that has made TikTok work is their particular algorithm, which is they are the only ones who know exactly how that works. So from a standpoint of things that are valuable in this world to American buyers, whatever the algorithm is that makes TikTok work is one of those. And certainly you look at this, you have to look at it through the lens a little bit of somebody like an Elon Musk or an American investor, while they may also really genuinely have security concerns as a business person. That's a boon. If somebody can make them sell that to them. Exactly. Of course that's why they don't want to sell.
Well, if it's also data gathering, we can't ignore that either.
Yes, that's right.
Well, staying with the Supreme Court decisions in action this week, technology has made pornography more accessible than ever, but 19 states across the country have passed laws requiring porn site users to complete an age verification process. Now, after arguments heard this week, the Supreme Court will decide if these laws are constitutional and where they intersect with issues of free speech and harm to minors. This was a difficult, for me anyway, argument to wrap your head around. So basically what happened is these laws were placed because states, not including Massachusetts, by the way, we are not one of the 19, but this really started in Texas, which is one of the 19. They recognized there was a harm to minors for the easy access that they would have to porn sites, and so they were sued by free speech entities who were saying, now you're limiting what people should access. Porn sites have every right to free speech. An appeals court decided that this was correct, and then this is how it escalated and landed before the Supreme Court. And so this really becomes a conversation about whether it's free speech or whether you're balancing minors' acts to pornography, all in an age, just like the TikTok conversation, where every government entity, including the Supreme Court, is trying to keep up.
So a little bit more detail. So Pornhub is at the center of this. And Pornhub has been attacked in these 19 states. And for Pornhub to keep operating, they would have to institute a very expensive identification thing. So normally you check in, whoever checks in on a porn site, okay?
Callie, tell us more about how you normally get onto a porn site.
Anyone can research this.
Wait, why am I blushing and I'm just watching this?
It says on the front page, are you 18 or over, or whatever, 25 or over, whatever it says. Okay, and you push a button and say yes and go on.
Yeah.
And so the arguments for these 19 states are like, well, that's not enough. Any kid, anybody can say yes and enter. So what we need are identification that would require some other steps, which would block out, presumably, all of these young people. But at the same time, what it's doing is blocking out the adults who have access to this. And some of the adults, some of the ones who are actually part of the lawsuit saying, hey, Supreme Court, don't let these people shut off our access because they claim they're concerned about kids. Is an issue. So there, in fact, one woman said, what I do in my bedroom is my business. So who are you to be telling me how to handle this? So if it's consensual between adults and there are no children involved in this, let's be clear that we're not talking about just letting people grab kids or use them in this way, then lots of adults will get slammed in this ruling if it goes the way of the 19 states. Now, last thing.
Yes.
This is a larger issue, actually, and it's a part of the movement, the book banning movement, the anti-abortion movement. These are the same arguments being used in each case. And so people outside of porn have an interest in this because the redefining or the attempt to shave how free speech is defined has become front and center. It's a culture war issue, and that's part of it. So it's a little bit more than just age identification. I just want to put that on the table.
Yeah, I mean, unlike the TikTok situation, this one is very much about the kind of content that's here, right? And everybody agrees. Everybody in this court case agrees that the state has a right to limit children's access to pornography. Everybody agrees on that, right? And actually, even though the TikTok case is not necessarily about the content, one of the things I think we all need to start looking at a little bit more carefully and getting to know a little bit better is these legal levels of scrutiny, because all of these free speech cases that continue to come to the Supreme Court, continue to come to the courts all over this country, in state courts and federal courts, a lot of it is about what you're talking about, Callie, this balance of, I say I want to protect children, but in the protecting of those children, how much access am I denying to the regular adult legal user, right? How much burden am I putting on the average person who the law, in the eyes of the law, should be viewed as innocent of anything until proven guilty, right? So the assumption is, how much burden are you putting to the legal user by trying to protect a minor or somebody who you claim is an illegal user? And it's those levels of scrutiny, and they're very well defined, and they have a whole bunch of like stuff around them that we'd all be good to, I think, bone up on to understand.
Well, here's how that argument played out in the court this week. Here's a notable exchange between the attorney representing the Free Speech Coalition and Justice Alito.
Why don't you talk about the most popular porn sites, which I gather you're representing? So one of the parties here is the owner of Pornhub, right?
Yes.
And what percentage of the material on that is not obscene as to children?
Well, Your Honor, if we're talking about the youngest minors, I would agree that most of it is, and that is how we read the law.
Is it like the old Playboy magazine? You have essays there by the modern-day equivalent of Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley Jr.?
Not in that sense, but in the sense you have sexual wellness posts about women recovering from hysterectomies and how they can enjoy sex.
Yeah, so this definitely got into content, and it was interesting as we're talking about, so who's going to define this? Of course, this has been before the courts before. You know what is porn, you know it when you see it.
Right.
But at a lower court level, they said, well, this has a chilling effect on other things, like the examples they cited were Game of Thrones, The Color Purple, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, presumably because they all have sexual scenes of some nature, not necessarily what you might find on an explicit porn site. So, and this, I don't think, is going to come down as a unanimous decision, as we saw in today's TikTok ruling, because there was dissent for some people. Some of the justices, I think Sotomayor included, finding merit in the free speech component of this.
Let me just also add that Pornhub is a U.S. site. There are many other sites that people can go to outside of the U.S. that would not have to follow these rules. So I'm just asking the people, the Made in America people, where are you at on this?
Yeah.
just asking a question.
Well, I'll just say I only go to Pornhub for the article.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That is every reason for me to move this show along. You are listening to our Arts and Culture Week in Review live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Coming up, we'll look back at the career of legendary filmmaker David Lynch, who died yesterday at age 78. That and more next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, the Women's March is returning to Boston this weekend as opponents of President-elect Donald Trump get ready for his inauguration. The Palisades fire destroyed more than 2,800 buildings, including the historic ranch house of American icon Will Rogers. And this week's Joy Beat, the self-proclaimed old ladies against underwater garbage dive into cold ponds around the Cape removing trash. It's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston, serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com.
The Big Dig, a bold idea with a bad reputation. But the real story, the one behind the headlines, might hold some clues for solving the infrastructure problems of our own time. Get the podcast, The Big Dig, wherever you listen.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and Edgar B. Herwick III. We're listening to the theme music from Twin Peaks because David Lynch, the singular filmmaker who specialized in the surreal, who mastered neo-noir mysteries and who examined the perversions of the American dream, died yesterday at age 78. His works defied genre and audience expectations, from the offbeat humor and supernatural horror of Twin Peaks to the pathos of The Elephant Man to the dreamlike Eraserhead and Mulholland Drive. Here are some highlights from David Lynch's storied career in the television and film I just mentioned.
Diane, 11:30 a.m., February 24th. Entering the town of Twin Peaks. Never seen so many trees in my life.
Hello! I was wondering if I might trouble you for a cup of strong black coffee, and in the process engage you with an anecdote of no small amusement.
There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. I hope that I never see that face ever outside of a dream.
Hey, my snakeskin jacket! Thanks, baby! Did I ever tell you that this here jacket represents a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom?
I am not an elephant! I am not an animal! I am a human being!
What kind of beer do you like? Heineken? That's Pabst Blue Ribbon!
You know about death, that it's just a change, not an end.
He helped define film in so many ways in this country. He helped define this country. It is so interesting to consider his biography of being born in Missoula, Montana, and then growing up in the Pacific Northwest, and then coming to the big city where he ultimately began creating his art at art schools, and then New York with Eraserhead. And all along the way, he was just observing, and he was soaking up what this country is, whether you're in a very quiet rural community or whether you're in a city, and what that all means about the people inhabiting those places and always what lies beneath.
It's interesting. I wasn't a huge David Lynch fan for this reason, because the surreal aspects of his work, which are so important and have been so influential. So I'm more of an appreciator of his influence, as I can see elsewhere, and the precision with which he went about his work, and the fact I'm always impressed with people who stated their own vision. You can say this over here and you can say this over here, but he was a guy that stayed with his own vision. I heard somebody this morning say that he was a mix of Frank Capra, the director, and Franz Kafka, the author, which, you know, brings in that surreal aspect. And I learned in doing this research that he at one time wanted to be a painter, which brings it full circle to his ability to, you know, use different textures for his work.
So on both of, it's so funny, Callie, because both of those points are similar to the things that I want to talk about. One, the Frank Capra thing's good. My favorite quote about him comes from Mel Brooks, who hired him to do The Elephant Man, which was his second feature film. He called him Jimmy Stewart from Mars. And I think that is so perfect in sort of capturing him. And the other thing is the painter thing. Because when I think about, you know, the tones of his films, right? I think about how you can have a painting and a good painter, and you look at it from a distance, you're like, oh, that's a really neat color of green. And then you get up there and you see that to achieve what appears to be green, underneath that green is some black and some white and some yellow and there's all of this layering to give a particular effect. When I think about his films, right, it has this layering. There's humor in the fear. There's innocence in the erotic. There's kindness in the monstrousness. There's familiarity in the bizarre. You know, there's so many layers that it's never just one note. The other thing I think is really interesting is I don't tend to love scary movies necessarily, right? But there is a lot of kind of scariness in his stuff. But I always got the feeling, with a scary movie, it often feels to me like the filmmaker is trying to scare me. With David Lynch, I get the feeling like he has known fear, and he is trying to communicate that with you. And that's very different, and I think very effective.
Well, I think that's what makes this very interesting is because, and I'm not disputing you, but we don't know that he knew fear because by all accounts he had a really happy growing up experience.
Yeah.
And then you look at films like The Straight Story, which I had totally forgotten that he did.
Great
About
movie.
it's basically a G-rated movie about where Richard Farnsworth plays a man driving across the country on his tractor.
Distributed by Disney.
Yeah, and it's just
Yeah,
so
that's
sweet,
weird,
and
yeah.
it's so not Lynchian. Yes,
Yeah.
he has his own verb that was created, but it's because he can. I guess that with that project, he didn't want to look beyond the tractor because that's usually what he did. What does that tractor really represent? What's behind those Oxford shoes that are being worn, or who is that prom queen really, or what is beneath literally, well, a bloody ear beneath that well manicured lawn? So I think he's so interesting, and to look back at the weather reports that he was giving, especially after the pandemic, he would just sign on to his computer and give these weather reports in Los Angeles, which were performance art. They were so mesmerizing. Speaking of art, by the way, he did spend some time here in Boston. He studied at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts here before going off to Philadelphia. Apparently, he didn't like his experience here very much in Boston. But speaking of Boston, here he is in 2005 at a lecture at Boston's Majestic Theater discussing the uniqueness of film as a medium of storytelling.
I love ideas. I like a story that's got some concrete structure, but also holds abstractions. Life is filled with abstractions. And the way we make heads or tails of it is through intuition. People get used to a film that pretty much explains itself 100%. An abstraction, to me, is a thing that cinema can say. And it's so beautiful, for me anyway, to think about these pictures and sounds flowing along together in time in a sequence, making a thing that can only really be said in cinema.
Pictures and sounds is really important there too. I think one of the hallmarks of his filmmaking, certainly early on, and carries through everything he did. Not just, I mean, we came in on that Twin Peaks music, which is just floating and gorgeous and evocative, but also the soundscaping in his movies. He and his sound designers would often be just out in the world doing field recordings, just collecting sounds, which he would then use. When he did the Twin Peaks reboot for Showtime, he had spent a couple years not even knowing he was going to do that, collecting sounds, which he was going to use for that if he ever got to it. And when he did it, he restricted himself in the editing to using just these sounds that he had spent all of this time collecting. I mean, he also had some music albums, which are really, not surprisingly, very weird, but I really like as well. So his use of sound and soundscaping as well as music in his films is also singular.
I would like to point out one other cultural influence. I believe I'm correct on this, and that is he was a filmmaker, but he was one of the first to sort of lead into prestige TV shows.
Sure.
You know, he was right before the big bubble where we got those, where people were saying, "Oh, these important filmmakers are now going to TV," and he sort of led in that direction.
Also, I gotta say, just great hair. Great hair. His hair is incredible.
You would appreciate that.
God, I love his hair.
Everything about him was well curated. We have to give him that as well. Well, next, of course, Los Angeles is still grappling with the wildfires that have killed at least 27 people and burned wide swaths of the region to the ground. That includes an architectural history that has gone up in flames, and as the entertainment industry contemplates how and whether to move forward during its very significant award season. So let's start with the architectural losses. And if you're logged onto our YouTube stream right now, or if you're here at the library up on the monitor, you'll find some of the images of the buildings we're talking about, including a famed house by the Austrian-American modernist Richard Neutra. As we begin to take a stock of what has been lost, Richard Neutra was very famous for this inside-out notion of his designs and architecture, which of course worked really well in California, where typically you have very beautiful weather. His homes are cherished, they're prized, many are museums, and so we're starting to get a sense of the loss. And Callie, you already were signaling the loss last week with Paul Williams.
Yes, Paul Williams, a black architect who was, I found out later, the first black member of the American Institute of Architects. He built 1,000 homes in LA. 400 were situated along the leafy streets of Holmby Hills, Brentwood, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, and in the Pacific Palisades, where Michael Richards of Cosmo fame and Seinfeld had a house, and it's gone now. These are treasured homes, and as they leave, you can't replace them. That's it, as you said about the other architects. So it's a real tragedy.
Yeah, it's an enormous tragedy, and also, In some ways, it's kind of a reminder about. I think a lot of times we sort of forget about the architecture that's just in and around us, including people's homes, which, maybe you're not going to be able to go into a private home, but in many places, including this city and this area included, you can walk by, you can look at them, you can enjoy them. You don't have to go to a museum for that, right? And so to me, it's also kind of a reminder to take stock of what's around you, and look at the buildings and the beautiful buildings that we have around us here, because, as we see here, tragedy strikes and they're gone forever.
And we should know, we don't know the others yet. We don't know of others. In fact, I discovered that CEO Bob Iger, who owns a Paul Williams home, ensured that one of his homes was a landmark in one of the neighborhoods, and in Brentwood. But the fires were just coming to Brentwood. Is it still there? I don't know.
Question mark, yeah.
I know. I think we take for granted that these buildings will always be there because they're so well cared for, because they are considered museum pieces, so they're cared for in that regard, but of course they are susceptible to fires. So we know that we've lost brutalist architecture, the Rand McNally mansion, craftsmen's homes, and brutalist structures, including a very iconic one right on the Sunset Strip as you're heading further up in California. So as we were talking about, the other major issue here is that this is award season, and this is very significant for Los Angeles when you consider the Oscars and you consider the Grammys. And there was this debate that was surfacing among people in Los Angeles, and that's how could you celebrate in a time like this? But I think that the conversation has now shifted. So you've gone from people like Gene Smart, who very loudly signaled, just take the money that you would spend on a broadcast and put that toward the rescue efforts, put that toward helping people rebuild. But a lot of other people have said, look, this is our business. Los Angeles is a gig economy. This is a 2-month huge boon for the year. When you think of the people building the red carpets, you think of the costumers, you think of the makeup artists, you think of the camera people, all the engineers it takes to have these broadcasts happen. So it seems like they're moving forward. And I have to say, I think that this is the right move, because I hope that they will use these opportunities to set the tone and signal to the world who may not have been paying as much attention the need right now.
Well, the Oscars of the Academy has already donated $750,000 to the Motion Picture and Television Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that provides assistance to those working in the industry. Yes, I know that sounds small given the industry. I'm sure there will be more. But just to point that out, that this is the way the industry is beginning to respond.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, from where I sit, I think everybody's kind of played this exactly right. It's like the Oscar nominations were supposed to be announced today, right? That has been pushed off
until next Friday. So we'll
talk about it next Friday.
But
I think that's right? Because right now the fires are still burning. There's still things happening. Don't do that now. We'll do it next week. I imagine if things aren't looking up, they'll push it another week. Don't cancel outright things that don't need to be canceled, because I think you're right, Jared. I mean, it's like you kind of gotta push through. So give it the time and space that it needs. It looks like most of these people are doing that. Also, don't forget the fact that in an Oscars broadcast, millions of people are going to tune in. I think there'll probably be a couple messages. You can donate by texting to this right now, and there's all kinds of money that will be raised.
When they do the international broadcast, it's billions of people watching around the world. And so I think it's also significant that so much of Los Angeles business is the entertainment industry, and they have come through COVID, which shut them down, and then they came through the 2 recent strikes which shut them down. They were in each case, each of the last years, they've just always been getting back on their feet. We talked last week about how some of the studios had shut down. Fortunately, they've been able to resume business because the fires haven't had an impact on where studios are located or where shooting in and around Los Angeles is happening. Keep in mind, most movies are shot throughout the world at this point and not necessarily within the confines of Hollywood. But the industry needs to move forward because, again, it's a gig economy.
Yes, and there are other industries that are impacted too. We're talking about music. I was thinking of, and I just want to say there are individual efforts that appear to be successful in trying to help people restore, get back on their feet. One of them is John Clayton, who's a jazz musician, very well known. He was in New York accepting the Jazz Visionary Award when his house of 40 years burned down. But the GoFundMe is going very well for him, and there are other examples like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is awful, and this is an awful thing. And like in any tragedy like this, you try to hold on to the thousands and thousands and thousands of stories of just people helping each other, right? Which is always the silver lining in something.
And they're going to
like
need
this.
a lot of help.
Yeah, they will.
Well, so now for some truly out of this world news. In a first, this is so interesting. The World Monuments Fund has added the moon to its list of endangered heritage sites. It cited concerns about potential damage to the moon and looting from future commercial space missions. So again, join our YouTube live stream if you'd like to follow along with some of the images we're talking about, because there is I don't think we can say that it's litter necessarily, but there's a moon house project that just went this week where this Swedish artist sent this little red house that we're looking at online and here at the library, sent it to the moon by, I believe it was by way of a Japanese
Amazon
iSpace facility. By Amazon, exactly. Free shipping. It's there in 3 days.
2-day delivery.
No, it'll take about 4 months because it takes the time for the little rover to deposit it on the moon. But this isn't necessarily the point. This is by an artist, by the way. This is what it will look like if you're streaming online. This is what it'll look like on the moon.
That's amazing, actually.
It doesn't look so little, actually.
You have no sense of scale,
No,
right? Like that
that's
could be
right.
the size of a thimble, or it could be the size of the Prue.
It is the size of the artist's hand. But usually the World Monument Fund is looking, as they have, they're looking at all manner of structures and places around the world, including some 60 lighthouses here off the coast of Maine, which they now find are susceptible to storm surges and erosion and rising tides. But they decided to include the moon this time.
Well, because they're looking ahead and realizing that people will be traveling there, and they're concerned about actual looting. We have, first of all, the footprints from Buzz Aldrin in the dust. And you imagine Neil Armstrong's, their footprints up there. There are apparently other little objects that have landed there that I didn't even know, that, before other people being around or dropping stuff off, or as this guy is sending. So there's a bit of stuff there.
I think I left my sunglasses there.
Oh, wait, what I'm hearing from you, too, is you believe we actually landed on the moon
Yes,
in the 60s?
I do.
What?
Yes, I do.
Kidding. Of course I do as well.
So their whole point is to preserve these sites, for culture and history. And so they want to make sure that when travel starts happening or just other people up there exploring, all this doesn't get destroyed. We want to preserve this.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's kind of, it's just like humans are going to human, like people are going to be people. And, this is a reminder of that, right? Because we've pretty much mucked up every corner of this planet, and you look at something like the moon, and sure, we've been there a few times, as you point out. There are a few things there, but largely we haven't gotten there yet, and they're looking at this saying, humans, you didn't do so good on Earth. Let's put a stake in the ground now and say, let's be careful as we move forward, because I think they are looking at this, and certainly, all signs point to the fact that over the next 10, 20 years, there is going to be a lot more private entities doing things on the moon, and I think there's going to be a lot of questions about who has ownership of these places and who's going to be responsible for taking care of these places and keeping them from becoming, something all littered with stuff.
I want to point out that they that not only point out places that they're concerned about preserving, but they raise money to try to fund initiatives. They design projects to try to keep them safe. And I know we're talking about the moon, but on the list of places they're concerned about right now is Gaza and Ukraine, losing those cultural artifacts because of this kind of stuff. So it's important.
And it's widespread between riverways in areas that people may not pay as much attention to. I thought this was really interesting. The Chapel of the Sorbonne in Paris.
Yeah.
That they have to call attention to the fact that is falling into disrepair, and it's a piece of cultural heritage worth saving. But to go back to the moon, I think it's really fascinating because the way this works is you have submissions for the World Monument Fund to consider. And so there is a whole collective team looking at this, and this really signals, to your point, Edgar, that we are looking at a point where there's going to be this is so incomprehensible, I guess, to us at this point in the planet's life and in our lives, that this will be a somewhat heavily trafficked place, the moon.
Yeah.
And you don't want that little rover landing on the footprints.
I also think it is worth noting, and you mentioned this, that the main lighthouses, because you know, this fund's been around for a long time. It's very rare that anything in North America gets included in this, and the fact that, you know, they're talking about these many historic lighthouses in Maine, and, you know, obviously it points to the challenges that are ahead of us with climate change. But that's a big deal that those lighthouses in Maine were included in this as well.
And they're still used, which is also interesting.
Most of them, it's amazing.
There's enough GPS now that in radar technology, but no, they very much still use them. Well, coming up, Pope Francis released his memoir this week. Did he have a Holy Ghost writer?
Oh my God.
Find out next on... Did you say, oh my God, Kelly?
Yes.
I guess they might know. Find out next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Only a fraction of stand-up comics are successful enough to make it a full-time gig, so it's understandable that one comic's mother wasn't sure about her son's career choice. But she warmed up to it once he convinced her to join the act.
We went on the chat show, and in front of a studio audience, she still stole the show, and then I thought, okay, I've created a monster.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting Jad Abumrad's How to Talk to a Human, live at Sanders Theater on Friday, January 31st. In his new show, the Radiolab creator explores the art of human connection. CelebritySeries.org. And Subaru of New England. This winter, the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester is committed to keeping your loved ones safe on snowy roads. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, helping to power the circular economy for over 20 years. Now accepting high-end luxury furniture consignments in the greater Boston area. Learn more at FurnitureConsignment.com.
Your world, your news on YouTube. Dive in and experience life in New England on the GBH News YouTube channel. From the big issues to intimate stories, GBH News.
Live only if you're in Puerto Rico. That's where the epically popular singer will be kicking off a concert residency. I think this is amazing, the way he is using his popularity, his fandom, and his power, that he has been on the road for a really long time, building his career. He loves Puerto Rico. This is his home. It is, his whole album is Puerto Rico in terms of the other musicians he's brought on board. And so he is creating this very lengthy residency like Adele out in Las Vegas. Nope, you have to go to Puerto Rico to see Bad Bunny, and people are going to go.
Oh, they're going to go big time. I mean, he's named the residency. It's called I Don't Want to Leave. I'm not going to attempt the Spanish version of that. But I love how this is not only his most Puerto Rican album yet, as you've said, but that it's another person who stayed true to his vision. He mostly sings in Spanish. He can do English too, but he's just become such a presence in the music industry, and also other people follow him because of his social justice efforts. I mean, when he released El Apagón in 2022, which is called The Blackout, about the goings-on or the lack of services for people in Puerto Rico, that just took off. I mean, the guy is just incredible.
I'm with you, Jared. Like, this is amazing. First of all, his new album, all 17 tracks on that album are in the Billboard Hot 100.
There you go.
So that, you want to talk about the height of popularity right now. The first is going to be 21 shows. The first 9 of them only for Puerto Rican residents. So the first 9, you got to be living in Puerto Rico to go. The amount of thought he has put into this, what he is signaling and what he is saying, I cannot say enough about it. Also, it is the ultimate sort of version of, I think, well-meaning people all the time, you know, at your best, once in a while, maybe you sit there and you think to yourself, what could I do to make a positive change in the world? Like, what could I possibly do? Here's somebody who has great power to do something and is choosing to do it. I mean, it's just incredible. The economic impact that this is anticipated to have in Puerto Rico is,
It's
I mean,
huge.
people are, nobody really knows, but they're throwing number like $100 million, $200 million. I mean, like there's lots of money going to be, I mean, this is incredible.
Because Puerto Rico has been beset with blackouts, displacement, storm recovery, gentrification, as he has argued and others have argued, government corruption. So this is a way to draw attention to that island. And yes, as you say, to get people there. We talk about just in Boston and in the surrounds of Massachusetts, the economic engine of the arts is about $2.5 billion annually. That number shifts, and it may be less coming out of COVID, but that's how much money comes in just because people are coming in to see things.
That's
so it's paying for the travel, it's paying for the babysitters, restaurants, all of those things, and he recognizes that. Here he is, Bad Bunny, is discussing his residency in Puerto Rico on The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon this week.
Was there a name for the residency?
Yeah, I don't want to leave. No me quiero ir aquí. And it's how I feel. I don't want to leave. I feel very happy and comfortable in my island and with the people that I love close to me. And at the same time, I want to invite like the world to come to Puerto Rico and
definitely go to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, have the whole experience.
It's the greatest. It's the greatest place.
He's a young guy, and he always has been this aware to do something like this. It's just, I'm really bowled over by it.
Two things. I think that he, even if it's possible, increased his popularity when he hosted SNL. That's one of the top-rated shows, and he was hilarious. So let's just say that. The second thing is, just want to shout out to Lin-Manuel Miranda, who was an artist who brought Hamilton to Puerto Rico. Also, just for the same kinds of reason, wanted to make sure that the people of Puerto Rico got a chance to, because that's where he's from, to be able to partake of it and bring economics.
It's the economic thing is, I find myself, and I understand, like, there are a lot of reasons why things happen and there's complications, and we talk a lot, and it's true about like economic disparity in terms of the top having so much and the bottom having, middle, well, everybody else not having as much. But there are also issues with the way that wealth is spread geographically too, right? It's, kind of concentrated in the coasts or in big cities or in certain kinds of places. I remember when Amazon did that thing about we're going to have a second location, and I remember talking with friends and saying like, if they really want to have an impact on the world, why don't they go to just some small town somewhere and set up shop and completely change it, right? Well, in some ways, this is a version of that. It's like saying, like, could he do a residency at Vegas? Sure. Could he have done it in California or New York? Yeah. People go to London and do residencies, but he's doing it at home. I mean, it's just, I love this.
Right.
Well, moving on, we had a pretty surprise drop this week, not from somebody you'd normally expect to drop an album. In this case, he's dropping a book. That would be Pope Francis, whose new autobiography, Hope, is out, making him the first sitting pontiff to publish a memoir since the 15th century. So here he goes, and this is something that he was going to do and was going to only release posthumously, and then decided to release this year because 2025 is a jubilee year for the Catholic Church. But I think I'm going to be cynical on this one. This is just about rebranding.
Interesting.
The church has been beset with a lot of controversy, as has he, for some of the things that he has not been able to accomplish, like completely addressing the sexual abuse crisis within the Catholic Church that continues to surface, and frankly, the derogatory terms he's used against gay people. You have not seen that addressed in the memoir. There was only a surface acknowledgement of addressing the church sexual abuse crisis. This memoir is mainly focused on his childhood.
Yeah, so maybe it's part one. Maybe it's part two.
He's taking the share approach?
Yes, exactly. It's interesting because I went the Pollyanna way and thought, well, maybe he's releasing it now so that he's here to actually respond to the response of the memoir. And there's a few things in there that are interesting, that he's had assassins in his trip to Iraq. I think it's fascinating that he says he didn't watch TV. I don't know why that is, but he hasn't.
Oh, I know why.
Yeah, he said there was something in he used to watch TV, and then in 1990 he was watching something that so offended him that he was like, I will no longer do this.
He was watching Twin Peaks, basically.
Well, okay. And anyway, he hasn't cheated since then, and he's planned his funeral, which we're not surprised by because somebody in his place would do that. But he had to know by publishing it now, aside from the timing of this jubilee, that it would stir a lot of discussion, and he'll have to respond to it.
All right,
So
here's a
I'll be
third
interested.
theory. Here's a
Okay.
third theory. So Jared's theory, rebranding.
Yeah.
Your theory, he can respond.
yeah,
My
he'll have to
theory, the
respond.
papacy's hot, baby.
In St. Peter's Basilica, but in a church in Rome where he often goes for solace and inspiration.
And that is on brand. I mean,
Yeah,
in fairness
right.
to him, like
Right.
for all of the criticisms that you can and should lay at the feet of anybody who's that powerful, that kind of way of being is very much how he has been the whole time. Yeah.
That lightning didn't get me even despite my comments. No, that's signaling it's our lightning round.
That's signaling the Pope is not happy with what we were talking about.
These are the headlines that caught our attention this week. Callie, what's yours?
Well, if people are fans of Sex and the City, or even if they weren't at the time, it's played everywhere on HBO and other. You'll be familiar with the outside of the building where Carrie Bradshaw lived. The stoop, it was in practically every episode. Well, there are real people that own that building, and the guy is annoyed by the thousands of people who still come because the show is repeated to look at and take pictures and stand outside. He said they will talk at 2:00 in the morning. Look, there's Carrie's window, and people are trying to sleep, and he's not appreciating it. So he's putting up like fencing, and it's not very attractive, just to slow them down. It reminded me of the conversation with those folks out in LA who were mad about the Marilyn Monroe visitors, the house that she had lived in, and they were coming constantly, and therefore they wanted to do some things they didn't get their way. But I just have to say to him that if he puts the fencing up, people are still going to come. I'm actually surprised I haven't been by there to look at it.
I was going to ask, have you been by?
You know what? I'm in New York all the time. I just haven't.
You got to get there before the fence gets finished.
I have to say, not too long ago, I saw the Friends building for the first time in New York. And there's actually a really great restaurant. It's in the Village, and there's a great restaurant right diagonal from it. And I happened to be seated by the window, so it was fascinating to watch all the people like me who just trotted up and took their pictures. And so many people arrive with their umbrellas, a la Friends, and take their pictures with the umbrellas. But that's a whole building, of course. It's not an individual house. But although I'm wondering, Kelly,
this is a brownstone.
Did this person buy it after Sex and the City?
No, that's a good question. I don't
that's
know.
on him.
Yeah.
That's like buying above a bar and then trying to shut the bar down because it's too noisy at 2:00 in the morning.
Also, I sort of feel like if you can afford to own that house in New York City, you can afford to soundproof it. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess so. Yeah.
Come on.
I guess nobody's using a flash outside it too. Probably. Maybe.
No, but I can imagine that at like 2-3 in the morning, the bars have let out.
Yeah.
Like people are ambling by. They're a little drunk. They're a little loud.
And
I can imagine that
If
probably
you've watched
is
the series a long time, you know that Mr. Big used to pull up and she yelled down and or whatever. So there's a whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's New York. This is why we love New York.
Yeah.
And this is why we live in Boston. Edgar, what's your headline?
Speaking of New York, mine actually ties in with New York as well. Grand Central Station. I really love a clever commercial or a clever bit of marketing, and I think this week the television show Severance. I don't know if folks have watched this television show Severance. It's about to come back for its second season. Jared, I know you absolutely love Severance, right?
I did absolutely not love Severance.
But
be
it as it may, whatever it may be.
14 hours to explain it to me.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, the basic premise of the show is that it's a world where people can make this choice where they get this procedure done so that when they're at work, they only remember their life at work, and when they're not at work, they don't even know what's happening in their world at work, right? So it's kind of a commentary on work and work-life balance and memory and lots of stuff. Anyway, what they did in Grand Central Station was they had these big glass cages that sort of showed up, these big booths, and then the cast appears in these booths and spent some time kind of going through like they're putting on a play silently in character the whole time. It was like, including Patricia Arquette, Adam Scott, all the stars, just without warning, right there in Grand Central Station, people flocking on the outsides, taking pictures, everything, including Ben Stiller was there filming it. He's one of the executive producers of the show. So it was like a big to-do and I think a very clever bit of marketing. And apparently they were also shooting it while it was happening because that's maybe going to be in an upcoming trailer. So also smart money.
Oh, very good.
So
well, if you want something not to do, episode 1 of the season is out now. So No, parts
Put
of
it
it
on the
I
list
did enjoy.
of not to do this weekend.
Okay, I was searching to find a New York thread, and I do have one to mine. The New York City set Mad Men, its star, John Hamm.
Oh, nicely played,
Thank
Jared.
you very
Well
much.
done.
Is the Hasty Pudding Man of the Year this year, which means he'll be coming to Boston, and on January 31st, he'll be roasted by the Hasty Pudding Theatricals as they're putting on their production of 101 Damnations, not Dalmatians. Ha ha ha. And I think I just think he is such a fantastic actor. He is so hilarious. I will say I met him once, and he was lovely and so kind and just a great guy. So
He's a good sport.
like Jennifer Coolidge from a couple of years ago, I think he'll be another great sport. We don't know who the female actress is who will be honored this year, but again, it's John Hamm on January 31st, Hasty Pudding Man of the Year. Well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. Tune in Monday. All three of us will be back, but we'll be back in our studio in Brighton, not here at the library, and we'll be talking about the inauguration through an arts and culture lens. We'll also look at what the second Trump presidency will mean for the arts. Callie, what's coming up on Under the Radar?
We're noting two events overlapping, the inauguration and MLK Jr. Day. And so we're looking at inauguration poetry and also protest music.
And Edgar on the Curiosity Desk?
We're looking for your curiosities. If you got an idea for us for a story, or you've got something you want us to look into, send an email, curiositydesk@wgbh.org.
Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corshio. Thanks to the Lennox Hotel, the Newsfeed Cafe. Thank you to everyone who came down here at the Boston Public Library to visit us today. We always appreciate seeing you. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a TikTok-free, art-filled weekend.
Where is Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I've got Maria Jalpirash with Schubert coming up in a few minutes. Here now, Vercini's first overture. Reinhard Goebel leads Musica Antiqua of